Welcome into the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show here on the Better Sports Network. I am Eric Balkman. You know me from the FFPC, the Fantasy Football Players Championship, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the Rotoviz High Stakes Lowdown as well. Follow me on the X at Eric Balkman. So glad to have you aboard for our final show of March. In fact, we are less than 1 month away from the 2024 NFL Draft. We can't wait to talk about it, so we're not going to wait. We're going to talk plenty of draft tonight. We're going to get into a lot of rookies. We're going to get a lot of dynasty angles for some veterans as well. And who better than to bring on then Matt Donnelly from the Dynasty Vipers Network. You've seen his work at Fantasy Points at Rotoballer. You follow him on the X at Matt Donnelly FF. Matt, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I think this is going to be 2 hours of fun, man.
Hey, I'm looking forward to it. Usually Matty cuts me off at about a half hour or so. That's usually I'm working with other people. But so we'll see how this goes before he kicks me off the show. And if these Jalen McMillan takes go anywhere, it might be a 15-minute show before you know it. So, it's good to be back. It's been a while since I've been on the Better Sports Network, so I'm looking forward to it tonight.
Well, we're looking forward to picking your brain on a lot of stuff tonight. Coming up on the show tonight, we'll go around the NFL. We'll find out about the Broncos' new receiver that they just signed. I also want to get Matt's takes on some of the new free agent signings, not necessarily free agent signings, but players in new places. Keenan Allen, Marquise Brown, Joe Mixon gets an extension. We'll get his thoughts on that. At the bottom of the hour, we're going to find out where he stands on some of the rookies, including Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors. We'll get into Trey McBride versus Sam Laporta, and then I think some Caleb Williams versus Jaden Daniels as well. And then in the second hour of the show, we're going to find out what's going to happen to some of these players. Brandon Ayuk, what's going on with him right now? More importantly, what's going to happen to him? Curtis Samuel is now a Buffalo Bill. What's going to happen to there? And what's going to happen to him there? And what's going to happen in year 2 of Bryce Young? And then we'll get into some rookies that you need to know. Jalen McMillan, we'll definitely get into that. Brock Bowers, Xavier Worthy, Bo Nix, Marshawn Lloyd, just a few of the rookies we'll be talking with Matt tonight. As a reminder, I do want to tell everybody that with the FFPC, the 2024 Fantasy Pros Championship is live. It has been live for a little over a month. A $1 million grand prize and a $6 million prize pool. Go to myffpc.com to play in that. Plus the Never Too Early Best Ball tournaments. We're in the final month of those. Those have been going on since January. They stop on April 25th. You can have a chance to win $25,000 or a $10,000 grand prize in those tournaments. It is something that we launched in January and will stop before the NFL draft. So a lot of fun with that as well. Don't forget about the Dynasty Orphans and the new Empire Leagues, which I'm going to tell you about with the FFPC later on in the show. That's myffpc.com, myffpc.com. Shout out to our producer, Matt Deutsch, tonight. And Matt, let's kick things off with what I just said. Denver has a new receiver. It is Josh Reynolds. He leaves Detroit to sign with Denver, 2 years, $14 million. Now, last season, he had 40 catches, just over 600 yards. He gets in the end zone 5 times. A possession guy that I think could fit in nicely with Denver. I know there was talk about Cortland Sutton maybe not being back in Denver next year. However, he's there right now. Josh Reynolds is there, and Marvin Mims is still there as well. How does this shake out? Let's look at it from a dynasty angle. Does Josh Reynolds move the needle for you at all, Matt?
Josh Reynolds specifically does not move the needle. His best season was that year with the Rams, like 2020, 52 catches, 618 yards. I love Josh Reynolds. I think he's a great bye-week filler guy. If a wide receiver gets hurt, we saw him fill in and have some success. Khalif Raymond filled in last year for Detroit. But for me, this tells me more about Marvin Mims than it does about anybody else. They let Jerry Jeudy go. They brought in Tim Patrick, who had some success, but we really haven't seen him. And then we've seen Josh Reynolds. He's not a real big threat here. For Dynasty, this is like, hey, unless Denver goes out there and drafts a high wide receiver early, which I think their attention is kind of elsewhere at this point than wide receiver, this is saying all kinds of things for me when we talk about Marvin Mims in particular, because he is by far the most dynamic player on this Broncos offense. We're talking about punt return. We're talking about his yards after the catch. Every big play that took place in Denver last season, I think if we talk about Marvin Mims a little bit later, I think 8 of the top 10 big plays for this Broncos offense were courtesy of Marvin Mims. So for me, Josh Reynolds comes in there, adds a little bit of stability there. We don't even know who the quarterback's going to be. Is it going to be Jared Stidham? Is it going to be Bo Nix? Are they going to move up for J.J. McCarthy? We don't know what this quarterback situation in Denver is going to look like. So it's really hard to get excited about anybody, especially Josh Reynolds. But I still like Marvin Mims because it's not one of those big-time plays. They let Jerry Jeudy go. They brought in what I feel is a bit of a lesser option in the passing game than Jerry Jeudy in Reynolds. So I feel that this is good for Marvin Mims more than anybody.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too. I mean, because Josh Reynolds, well, like you said, and I'm with you, it doesn't move the needle at all. But I think this might create a little bit of a buying opportunity for Marvin Mims right now, right? Because in Dynasty, we're looking at, well, the most important year is the year that's upcoming, right? And now Reynolds is going to be there, Sutton's going to be there. But if you're not a believer in Reynolds and you're a believer in Mims, this might be a good time to go out and grab yourself a couple of shares of Marvin Mims.
No, I got to be honest here. I am a Marvin Mims stan. I mean, that's who I am. I loved him coming out of the draft. I loved everything. He was breaking records that CeeDee Lamb had set previously. So the talent is certainly going to be there when we talk about Mims. So I do like him. And hey, if it helps me push my own agenda on a prospect, I'm darn well going to use that to my benefit.
And you, as well you should. Mike Williams has left the Chargers. Well, I mean, they politely asked him to leave when they cut him, basically. He has moved on to the New York Jets. He says he's going to be ready for week 1. This is a player that tore his ACL last year. He's still recovering from that. And now we're trying to figure out how he fits into this Jets offense. Now, there's still a chance that the Jets draft Brock Bowers. I think that we've heard that before. Otherwise, it's Tyler Conklin. We know Garrett Wilson's going to be a target monster here. Mike Williams now gets Aaron Rodgers, goes from Justin Herbert to Aaron Rodgers. You know, we could debate whether that's a quarterback improvement or not. He's still next to a guy who's going to be catching a lot of passes like he was in Los Angeles with Keenan Allen. But the question here has never been talent. It's always been about injury. Now Mike Williams goes to New York. What are your thoughts on him? Number one, is he going to be ready week 1? Do you believe him? And number 2, what should we be doing with him if we own him or don't own him in dynasty leagues?
Mike Williams is an interesting thought process here. He's 30 years old, injury history. He's basically been that poster child for injury prone, right? We've looked at this, and now you're sending a guy who's got a bad history of injuries to that MetLife turf there in New York. That cannot be a good combination. Anytime someone gets hurt, it's at MetLife Stadium. So I'm really concerned about Williams' ability to play a full season. I'm thinking we get 10 games out of him, give or take, somewhere in that ballpark. But you can't take away what he's able to do when he is on the field. 88 career games over 7 seasons, 309 catches, 4,806 yards, 31 touchdowns, 15.6 yards per reception. So that's all good. You go this further. You're talking about a guy who's 6'4". He's going to be a favorite target of Aaron Rodgers. And the one thing that Williams has done probably better than most wide receivers, he's probably in the top 10, 15. His 57.7% contested catch rate, that was 5th amongst wide receivers. His lowest contested catch rate in his career, 48.5%. So Aaron Rodgers is going to love himself some Mike Williams, who's going to be able to go up there and get it. We've seen him make these unbelievable circus catches there. And if people remember, because we have a very short memory when it comes to fantasy football. We are about what have you done for me lately? And we'll talk about that when it comes to prospects, but it's about the veterans too. If people remember, he was off to a very good start last season before injuring that ACL. In 3 games, 19 catches, 249 yards before injuring that ACL there and having that surgery that kind of took him out there. So you put him right beside Garrett Wilson. I think they complement each other extremely well. Now, whether you bring in Brock Bowers or Ty Conklin, let's not forget, Ty Conklin's a pretty good tight end in his own right. He's one of the few that have, I can't remember what the numbers, but so many receptions over the last 5 years. He's right up there with the elite tight ends, but nobody wants to talk about that. Listen, Xavier Gibson's in the slot. Alan Lazard is Alan Lazard. I mean, these are not guys that you're going to worry about cutting into Mike Williams. Garrett Wilson's going to get his. Breece Hall is going to get his. Aaron Rodgers is going to deliver that ball to the open wide receiver. To whatever makes Aaron Rodgers look the best, that's where he's going to go with the ball. So I do think that while Mike Williams is healthy, he is going to be one of those guys that you could put in your starting lineup each and every week, a solid wide receiver too. But he's got one of those weird kind of arches here as far as fantasy is concerned. He could be wide receiver 18. He could also be wide receiver 46. He's been a boom or bust guy throughout his career, a guy you can't really trust, but when he goes off, he's going to go off. So, I mean, I'm going to invest in him a little bit. I'm not going to give up a whole lot to get him on my roster. I'm not going to overdraft him, but I will be able to put him in my starting lineup when he's healthy and feel pretty good about that.
Tyler Conklin, you're right, Matt. I just looked this up. I didn't even realize this. 61, 58, and 61 his last 3
Yep.
years as far as receptions go. And he has now it was scoreless yards last year, didn't get in the end zone. However, he's had at least 550 yards in each of those last 3 years as well. So a very reliable tight end that you can count on. And whether they take Bowers or not, he's going to be somebody to be reckoned with in that offense. Let's move on and talk about. So I have Keenan Allen in one of my, I think, 2 of my dynasty leagues, but one's a really, really good team that's been competing for a title like the last 3 or 4 years. Now, the question is what do I do with Keenan Allen, who will be 32 years old this coming year, and no longer with the Chargers. He's going to be with the Bears, probably catching passes from Caleb Williams. This guy had 108 catches last year, most he's ever had, and he only played in 13 games.
Yep.
Second most receiving yards of his career, 1,243. Oh, by the way, like I said, in just 13 games. I think that he is, I don't want to say he's not slowing down because Father Time will get everybody, but he's one of these guys, Matt. I compare him to Hines Ward back in the day. He's the guy I always bring up where everybody said, get rid of him, trade him. He's on the downslide of his career, and he never was. Like, he had another 3 really good seasons after everybody thought he had fallen off the cliff. Keenan Allen could be one of these guys. I mean, they're talking extension in Chicago. And I think that while we tend to want to get rid of aging assets on our dynasty teams, I think Keenan Allen might be an exception for me. How do you feel about him?
I think we got to remember that Keenan Allen used to be that poster child for injury prone, right? We talked about Keenan. I just mentioned Mike Williams being that guy, but there was a point when we were trying to get away from Keenan Allen because of the risk of injury. So even though he's a veteran at his age and all these years of service, he hasn't really played as much because of those injuries early on in his career. So I think we have to take that into account to a degree. Now, for Keenan Allen, the move from LA to Chicago, it's going to be a bit of a downgrade. I mean, as far as fantasy is concerned, you're going from playing in sunny California to the windy city there in Chicago in November, December. Nobody wants to play football in November, December in Chicago. And I'm from Canada. I know a thing or two about 40 below weather. People, you don't want to get hit when it's 35 below zero. You don't. Alligator arms, they become a little bit more frequent. Keenan Allen, as sure-handed as he is, there may be a few extra drops there when the weather turns on him. And he's going to be going from Justin Herbert, an established QB1 as far as fantasy is concerned, to Caleb Williams, who is a relative unknown. Lots of people in the draft community think he is generational because we like to use the word generational every other day of the week and twice on Sundays, where it means absolutely nothing anymore. But there's also some that think he could be a bust. I mean, when you are given a pedestal on as far as fantasy is concerned, the risk of a bust is so much greater, right? I mean, we've had so many good quarterbacks, Peyton Manning versus Ryan Leaf. There's conversations where we've had a good quarterback, another great quarterback where they haven't competed. They haven't done nothing. Look at Bryce Young there last season, his situation there with the Carolina Panthers. The difference is here, Chicago is supporting Caleb Williams, who we are assuming that they're going to take with that first pick. DJ Moore, Gerald Everett, Cole Kmet. These are all weapons. They've also gone down there and got DeAndre Swift. We'll talk about him as well. So Caleb Williams has something that no other first overall quarterback has had, and that is a good supporting cast. This move, for me, is better for the Chicago Bears and Caleb Williams than it is for Keenan Allen. The way I think about that is we know Waldron's coming in there with that 12 personnel. He's got a yak machine there in Gerald Everett to go opposite of Cole Kmet. That's good. This offense with that 12 personnel, like I said. And then we look at a little bit further. DJ Moore is going to do DJ Moore things. Keenan Allen's going to do Keenan Allen things. They're going to kind of work off of each other, and they're both going to be 1,000-yard wide receivers when it's all said and done, no matter how you want to look at it. But what this does allow, it allows Chicago to get creative with that 9th overall pick. A lot of people had Rome Odunze going to Chicago at 9. I've seen that a lot. Well, they don't necessarily have to go there. They have some other things that they can do on this offense. They can trade back, acquire more draft capital, or they can go out there and get a tackle like a Joe Alt if he slips. They can go out there and get a Dallas Turner, an edge defender that they could really use right now. So this is a better move for the Bears than it is for Keenan Allen in fantasy. And like I said, Keenan Allen, I'm already bookmarking him for about 1,000 yards next season, one way or the other. So I do like Keenan Allen fantasy. I think he's going to take a little bit of a dip going from Los Angeles to Chicago, but I think this Bears team is going to be much better overall. I love the move for the Bears. Not so much for Allen, but it doesn't hurt that much either.
Yeah, it's not a lateral move. I mean, there is a bit of a downgrade for Allen. But the next guy we're going to talk about, I think he gets a big time upgrade, not only with quarterback, but with the offense as well. Marquise Brown. signed a contract with the Kansas City Chiefs for 1 year worth up to $11 million. Now, no more Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He was released by Kansas City, and the Chiefs seemingly haven't needed Tyreek Hill because they've won the last 2 Super Bowls without him. But we all saw the deficiencies with the wideout room last year, and they're trying to fix it right now. Marquise Brown goes from catching passes for Kyler Murray when he was healthy to Patrick Mahomes. Now, I think we cannot talk about Marquise Brown without mentioning Rashee Rice, who a lot of people were very, very excited about getting late in the first rounds of the rookie drafts last year. And now they're kind of like, now Marquise Brown's there. Am I overrating Rashee Rice? Is this a time to get out high on Rashee Rice because Brown is going to be, the best pass catcher that the Chiefs have had on the perimeter since, Tyreek Hill. I think it's interesting. How are Marquise Brown and Rashee Rice going to work together next year as far as fantasy goes? What do we need to be doing with them in dynasty leagues?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to work well together. I mean, Rashee Rice is going to be that intermediate kind of guy there with Travis Kelce. They're going to work the underbelly. Marquise Hollywood Brown is going to be everything that the Chiefs hoped Marquez Valdes-Scantling was going to be when he replaced Tyreek Hill as that deep ball threat. You're not going to be able to game plan around Marquise Brown, who's going to be able to stretch the field, Rashee Rice, what he can do after the catch, Travis Kelce, Isaiah Pacheco, Patrick Mahomes. It is going to be tough to game plan for this Chiefs team. So I think all these playmakers here have some value. And as far as Brown he's more than just a speed guy. We automatically just kind of pigeonhole him into speed, right? If you look at his reception perception profile there for Matt Harmon, you'll notice that he's been making a living on those intermediate in-breaking routes, and he's been productive versus zone coverage. However, last couple seasons there from that 1,000-yard campaign in 2021, he's been hurt. Either him or Kyler Murray's been hurt. And here, the NFL, what have you done for me lately business? Last season, foot injury, severe hamstring injury. He spent more time on the injury report than he did on the football field. But we did get a glimpse there through 6 weeks in 2022 that Brown has the capability of being a top 5 fantasy wide receiver. If you take that 6-week stretch here in 2022, I know it's only 6 weeks, but that would have translated to 1,300 yards and 120 receptions. So truth is, this is going to be the first time that Brown is in really a pass-first type offense. Remember him and with Greg Roman there in Baltimore, where they threw just 51% of the time. That was 29th in the league. Even in Arizona, and people think Kyler Murray, they think passing the ball. Well, the truth is, in Arizona, the Cardinals passed roughly just 54% of the time, which is right in the middle of the pack. I think we're ranked about 16th or so. Now he goes to the Chiefs team the last 4 or 5 years, 64% of the time. So there's going to be an automatic uptick as far as Brown is concerned, as far as fantasies, because we know we're looking at least a 10% increase in pass rate from this offense.
Marquise Brown is a guy that I wish I would have had more shares of Dynasty, because I think he's going to be much more difficult to get. Prior to his signing, it would have been great to grab him, and now we have to roll with the punches because it is the new normal with him being the Kansas City Chief.
And the thing is, he's only like 26 years old, so we're not talking about an aging asset. We're not talking about a 28, 29-year-old wide receiver starting to hit that kind of peak. We're talking about a guy who's entering the prime of his career right now, and with Patrick Mahomes under center, I mean, that gives you an automatic 2-round ADP bump in itself.
You can't do better than that. I mean, this is a potential. This could be a huge season for Marquise Brown, where he ends up signing 4 years, $70 million with somebody next year, based on how he does in 2024.
This is huge for Patrick Mahomes, because Patrick Mahomes, I probably get a little bit of heat this, but he's been a very good game manager. If you look at the numbers, his yards per attempt, it's way down there. It's like 7 yards per attempt, 6.8. I mean, it's really down there. It's not Patrick Mahomes-esque numbers the last couple seasons without the Tyreek Hill threat being there. It has been a lot of screens for these yak guys. We know Travis Kelce after the catch. We know Rashee Rice after the catch. It's been a lot of screens, a been a lot of quick hitters, and let your guys kind of make the plays. Now he's got a guy that he can just let it go. So it's going to be a huge game change for Patrick Mahomes moving forward.
I want to talk about, you talked about Marquise Brown not being an aging asset, and I totally agree. He is not. I mean, he is still ascending. A player that I knew was an aging asset, a player that I knew was a real possibility that the Bengals would release him after the 2023 season was Joe Mixon. I had Chase Brown up the wazoo in my dynasty leagues, was very excited for that. Then they got Zach Moss. That's a different discussion. But I do want to focus on Mixon here because he ends up not getting released. He gets traded to the Texans, who promptly give him a 3-year, $27 million extension. This is a dude who is going to be 28 at the start of the 2024 season. This includes $13 million in guaranteed money. The last 3 seasons, Mixon has hit 1,200 total yards from scrimmage. He is now going to be under contract with the Texans through 2027. Now, I think this is it goes well. I can't go without saying because I'm going to say it. He wasn't exactly efficient with the last 3 years. He was not the most efficient guy in the world. This is the whole Michael Turner accumulator thing, where it's just like I don't want accumulator backs. I want the explosive guys. But then I see the money that Houston threw at him, and I know there's some funny money in this too. But Mixon with an ascending offense, even though he's going to be 28, still think there's a couple of good years of Joe Mixon here that we should be having on our dynasty teams, Matt.
Well, you mentioned the inefficiency in his run game. I mean, there's a couple games that were kind of pushed up there as far as fantasy concerned. There's that 4-touchdown game that comes to my mind there. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that was Carolina or whatever it was. So there's some games that kind of really pushed that narrative a little bit there. But he still finished with 1,000 yards, still 9 touchdowns on the ground. He's got 62 on his career. I think he's averaged 4.1 throughout his career on the ground. He's caught 283 passes for another 2,100 yards. I mean, he's going to be that guy to do everything. We knew that what Houston wanted to do, right? We knew it. They were already in. They were finalists for Saquon Barkley. Mm-hmm. They lost that out to the Philadelphia Eagles there. So really, Joe Mixon, he's a nice consolation prize for a Texans offense that wanted a running back. That was the one thing they wanted to go out there. We'd heard them tied to Barkley before free agency even started. So you knew that they were on the hunt. I think that you're almost guaranteed. I mean, efficiency is one thing, but volume is still going to be there for Mixon. I'm thinking 250 to 280 touches is what we're looking at when we factor in his ability in the passing game. And teams, Nico Collins, Dalton Schultz, Tank Dell if he's healthy, Noah Brown is still there. This is a Texans offense that is going to spread teams out. They're not going to be able to put these guys in the box. So he's basically making literally a lateral move from the Bengals with T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and everything else. Basically, Chase Brown got mossed, like you said. I think Joe Mixon ended up in a better situation. Now, I will say this. The one thing that does give me a little apprehension when it comes to Joe Mixon is the fact of the offense of the Slowik's outside zone running scheme. It does have a little bit of a concern for me because if you look at what Mixon's production and the averages here, when asked to run zone concepts, it has decreased quite a bit. He averages 3.35 yards per carry versus 4.45 per carry when running in those gap man concepts there. We saw very eerily type similar numbers from Dameon Pierce, who again was good when he ran against man, but when we got into those zone concepts there, he started to decrease. That's where we saw Devin Singletary take over for Pierce last season. So that's one thing I'd be a little bit concerned about with Joe Mixon, but I mean, the volume's going to be there. The money's already talking, end of the day, follow the dollars, right?
I think the thing that I've always learned, and Matt, you've known this, but over the last couple of years, these like Josh Jacobs, who we'll get to a little bit, he signs this big $48 million deal. He's not going to get $48 million. And I think that's the same thing with Mixon here. Like, I don't know what the potential out is, but if there's a potential out after 2024 and he's the same inefficient guy and he's not anything special, Texans are going to move on from him. I don't think that happens, but there's a non-zero chance that it could for sure.
I think it's realistically, it's a 2-year deal realistically. I mean, I don't think that third year is really there. I think it's one of those fake years where they kind of put a little bit of the money on the back end to kind of stretch that cap out.
Dom Gazzetti, who's watching us on YouTube, do you think those schemes from Cincinnati were a reflection of having the backup quarterback versus Joe Burrow in there? Does that play into it at all for you, Matt?
No, because what Cincinnati did, and Indianapolis did this a lot. So when you're looking at Zach Moss moving over to Cincinnati makes a lot of sense because they do run a lot out of shotgun in the I formation, which we've seen Joe Mixon have success. It's the fact now the scheme for him moving into a Slowik's type offense there where it is more outside zone scheming. I mean, that's where Mixon's going to struggle a little bit more. But I think the offense was really good for Joe Mixon. I think it's going to be good for Zach Moss there because it's basically 1-for-1 for Zach Moss. I think Houston did good. I think Cincinnati did good. We've been hearing about Mixon being moved for the last 3 years, so it finally happened. He ends up in a good spot for fantasy. We feel good about that. And we feel good about Zach Moss basically going to the exact same offense he just left in Indianapolis.
Let's move on and talk and go. We'll move on and go back because I want to talk Bears with you again. DeAndre Swift, he leaves Philadelphia for Chicago. Now, one of the things that I liked about Swift was he was a pass catcher. And I love that. In Detroit really never unlocked it. Philadelphia did. I look at him now in Chicago playing with Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams played at USC last year with Marshawn Lloyd. Marshawn Lloyd played, he had 100. No, I take that back. He had 13 catches last year, Matt. I get excited about DeAndre Swift, but I'm less excited if his quarterback's not going to throw to him. And oh, by the way, Caleb Williams, not exactly the worst quarterback runner in the world. He's pretty good on his legs too. How much are you concerned with Swift's new landing spot here in Chicago, knowing that's kind of how Caleb Williams treated his running back last year?
Well, I'm pretty sure DeAndre Swift's first thing is like, hey, do you guys got like a midway maul or a brotherly shove or something? Because he lost a lot of those touches, like you said, to Jalen Hurts. It's like, hey, yeah, we're inside the 5. Sorry, DeAndre, get out of here. We're going to let Jalen Hurts squat this entire offensive line. That's where DeAndre Swift lost his value last season. 4.6 yards there per game on the ground. I mean, he had 1,000 yards rushing for the first time in his career. Chicago runs the ball. They want to run the ball. They've done this for the last few seasons. Yes, Justin Fields was a factor in the whole running game. David Montgomery, fantastic runner in his own right. We saw them continue to run with Roschon Johnson and Khalil Herbert. They still wanted to run, even though it was ineffective, but they were still producing 141 yards per game on the ground. And that bodes well for DeAndre Swift. So I don't think we're going to see a drop off as far as that rushing production is. And it can only get better for him because Chicago has to give him more opportunities inside the 5 than what he got there in Philadelphia. We know that this offense is going to be good. We know DJ Moore. We said Cole Kmet, Gerald Everett, 12 personnel. You're going to have 2 tight ends out there a lot of the time in Waldron's offense. So there's going to be opportunities for Swift to get his hands on the ball. I think he's in that running back, I don't want to call it the running back dead zone. I'm going to call it the running back green zone, that RB10 to RB15 range where anyone could be that guy. Josh Jacobs is a guy who's very familiar with that, where you're kind of, before the season starts, people are looking at you as RB16, RB18. Well, DeAndre Swift could be that guy who finishes RB8 just as easily as he could be RB15, as long as he gets some of those touches down inside the 5-yard line. I also think the fact that he stays healthy, that's going to be the key here for him, because Chicago, they had to have been uninspired by Khalil Herbert, or else they don't make this move. They thought they had a replacement for David Montgomery. They let him walk, which was probably their biggest mistake. And this is their way of righting a wrong, is by bringing DeAndre Swift back in to replace David Montgomery, which they kind of screwed that up last season. But Swift last season, RB17, or he's currently the RB17, 74th overall, RB20 as far as ADP is concerned. Those numbers, expect them to rise up throughout the offseason. Here's a bit closer to training camp, closer to the regular season. And I think Swift's efficiency numbers that have been a reason for concern in years past are going to be much better this season, because I think they're going to ask him or give him more opportunities than what he had in Philadelphia.
Despite DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Gerald Everett, Cole Kmet, all those other guys, it is a rising tide that is raising all those ships, including DeAndre Swift. So he'll actually be more beneficial, or he'll be the beneficiary of that, rather than not getting enough opportunities because of all those other guys. That's how you're seeing it?
I think so. I mean, like I said, 12 personnel, rookie quarterback, quick, easy hitters. You got 2 wide receivers in DJ Moore and Keenan Allen who can really work the intermediate end of the field, right? They can both work underneath, give you some nice, easy completions. You got 2 tight ends out there that can do the same thing. DeAndre Swift, a guy who can dump it off and let him run it. So I think they're going to I don't want to call it dumb down the offense for Caleb Williams, but I think they're going to massage him in nicely, and you're going to have a running back giving him an opportunity to maybe get some extra touches inside the 5 that he never got previously.
Let's move on and talk about Saquon Barkley here. Mother of God. He has been languishing in New York since the start of his career. Had a couple of good seasons. He had some soft tissue injuries. I get it. But this is one of the best offensive lines in professional football. He will be playing behind. He will be playing next to a couple of talented receivers in Brown and Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Jalen Hurts. I mean, this is an uber talented offense with Philly and now he gets to be the centerpiece of that backfield. 3 years, $37.8 million. Now, I think that the whole Gainwell, Boston Scott, that was a discussion with DeAndre Swift as how much they're going to impact that. I don't see that as a discussion with Saquon Barkley. You give him this money, he comes in, he wants the ball, he's going to get the ball, and he's going to have a ton of action, as much as he can handle. The question now for Barkley is not, is this a good move? Is he going to be good? Is it going to be a banner 2024 season? The question is he going to be the best? Is he going to end up as RB1? I mean, I don't think I'm crazy in thinking that Barkley has a pretty good chance of taking over that position of being the leading fantasy point scorer for running backs this year. What am I missing here, Matt?
I don't know, but Howie, if you're watching this, look into the camera, blink twice if you made this deal against your own will, because this is not a Howie Roseman type deal, right? I mean, I think he gave the big contract out there to LaShawn McCoy about 5 years ago, but this is not how the Eagles typically operate. And I think they wanted to stick with DeAndre Swift until he wanted more than what they were willing to pay, which they ended up saying, they're like, if we're going to pay this kind of money to a running back, we might as well just go get out there and get Saquon Barkley. I think that's probably how this conversation went. I do not like this deal for the Eagles. I really don't. It's second highest paid running back in NFL history on average per year salary. You talk about the money there. 26 of that is guaranteed. This deal could be worth as much as 46.75. Like, we're talking big time money here. But I mean, I guess if I hear correct, I think Jordan Schultz kind of reported this there, one of the insiders. The Giants, they didn't even make an offer to Barkley. So this is about the revenge narrative more than anything. Hey, if the Giants don't even want to make an offer, I'm just going to side with the team that's going to play them twice. I don't know how I feel about this for Saquon Barkley either. I mean, the offense is better. It's not that Mickey Mouse crap that he ran there in New York last season. Say what you will. The Eagles last season, they ranked 8th in the NFL, averaging 128.8 yards per game. But Jason Kelce is gone, so that's going to be a little bit of a hit. But this is still, like you said, one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Even with that, whatever you want to call it there in New York, Barkley was just 38 yards shy of 1,000. So I think you can expect him to kind of return to that 2022 form there where he was over 1,300 yards. So, I mean, for Barkley, he's going to have at least 1,300 yards in my guesstimation here as far as fantasy is concerned. But at the end of the day, it still comes down to the same question we had for DeAndre Swift. Will Jalen Hurts relinquish those goal line touches? That is the key. I think they're going to. I got to believe they have more trust in Saquon Barkley than they ever did in DeAndre Swift. But at the end of the day, I don't know if he's going to get those goal line touches. If he does, I mean, I can see where you're going. Barkley can easily be the RB1. If he gets 1,300 yards and 15 touchdowns, which, I mean, it is in the realm of possibilities here as far as fantasy is concerned, then Barkley could be that dude. Plus, he can catch the ball out of the backfield. We've watched him have success in the passing game as well. So, I mean, good move for the Eagles offense, good move for Saquon Barkley. But, man, for the Eagles, I don't like this because they have so many holes on that defense that needed to be addressed. And they spent all this money into a running back that the NFL in general has deemed not a position that they want to invest in. But I think that says more about this running back class coming in as far as rookies are concerned, more than it does about the running back position, more so than anything.
Do you think the fact that they want to keep Jalen Hurts healthy as long as possible, and now they have this big hoss in the backfield, does that make you think that maybe the tush push will still be used, obviously, but maybe used a little bit less frequently, and Barkley could be the beneficiary of some extra touchdowns that I think some people don't think he's going to get at this point?
I would hope so. I would hope that was the whole purpose of this signing, because I do believe that's what they need to do. They can't have Jalen Hurts get hurt. They have to run the ball. They have to give it to the running back. And if you can't trust Saquon Barkley running it in from the 5-yard line behind that offensive line, then there's going to be some bigger issues in this locker room as the season goes on.
Matt Donnelly is joining me here tonight. Follow him on the X at Matt Donnelly FF from the Dynasty Vipers Network on YouTube. Check out his work at Fantasy Points and Rotoballer. I want to take a quick break, but when we come back, let's find out where Matt stands on some certain players. Let's talk about Kyle Pitts and Kirk Cousins in that Falcons offense. Let's talk about Josh Palmer. Now that Mike Williams and Keenan Allen aren't there, we're going to lead things off with a Marvin Harrison Jr. versus Malik Neighbors standoff. It's going to be great. I'm Eric Balkman. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network.
The thing with Dynasty is that it's so hard to get a good league going. Like, it's very difficult to get all these friends that are going to be paying attention, or they're going to stick with it, and they're not going to say, "Oh, I don't want to play anymore. My team stinks. Find somebody else next year." Like, and then you're collecting dues, and then you're getting in arguments, and you're arguing with people on Twitter about dues. Like, we've seen too much of that going on. So it's very difficult. And what happens is you find like 5 or 6 good people that want to play, and then you don't have enough people, and you fill the league with a bunch of weirdos. So what I like doing, honestly, at this stage is if I'm going to play Dynasty, I want to play on a nice, clean, serious, professional site, and I go to FFPC to play, right? FFPC has never had a league fold. Eric Balkman over there told me that. He's like, if somebody has to leave a league, we just fill it. So your option is you can go and do a startup, and like Jack said in the chat, you start it, and then you go and you figure out who you're going to take from the top down. And if you want to do like a long rebuild, or a long-term team, or if you want to try and win right away and get a bunch of vets, you can do that. Or you can adopt an orphan team, and with that you go out and somebody quit, and that's so much fun, because then you take their team and you have all these guys that you like, but then you have all of these guys that they had that you don't like, and that's actually way more fun, because then you can trade all those guys, and it's so much fun to trade. Like when I go to orphan teams, I used to say, "Oh, I'm not going to take this team because all the players, I don't like them. I only want players I do like." But I've realized that it's actually more fun to take the teams that have a couple guys you really like and a couple guys that everyone else likes that you don't like, and then trade them. Like go and grab an orphan team like Gabe Davis and then trade him to some Gabe Davis guy. So go do that now. Use you can use the QR code here or a link in the description, or go to myffpc.com. Just make sure you use promo code COOP when you get set up. They'll give you $25 when you deposit 35 or more. And that's another thing. When you make a league with your friends, Coop isn't giving you $25, right? You have to pay the full dues. This time you get a little discount. So yeah, go over there. And also for you maniacs out there, they do have high stakes leagues. So these leagues, if you want, you can go big time. I know some of the redraft leagues. We announced on this channel a redraft league that 10K buy-in. I'm not sure the dynasty ones go that high, but they go into the thousands. So if you want to take this real seriously and get crazy with it, do it. That's the place to do it. myffpc.com, promo code COOP, baby. Go get set up.
23 minutes until the top of the hour. Welcome into the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show here on the Better Sports Network. Eric Balkman here from the FFPC, joined by Matt Donnelly from the Dynasty Vipers Network. Check out his work at Fantasy Points, Rotoballer, and other spots as well. Matt Donnelly, FF on the X machine. By the way, speaking of the FFPC, go to myffpc.com, myffpc.com right now to pick up some Dynasty orphan teams. We got a ton of great deals on there. Some teams have already had their entry fees lowered, some as little as $1. So you're basically getting in for a free year if you pick up some of these orphans. That's at myffpc.com. We also launched a certain form of Dynasty startup leagues, Empire Leagues. I'm going to tell you about that in the next segment, but so you don't want to miss that. This is something we're very, very excited about, and I'll tell you all about that after Matt Donnelly tells us where he stands on certain players. I'm going to lead things off. Marvin Harrison Jr. versus Malik Neighbors. The pro day for Malik Neighbors today. 4.35 40, 42-inch vertical, and 129-inch broad jump. This is insane. Now, in any other year, Neighbors would probably be the number one receiver off the board. It's probably still going to be Marvin Harrison Jr., although there is a case to be made that Neighbors is actually the guy that you want from a fantasy angle here. Matt, tell us why we should not overlook Neighbors as potentially the number one receiver this year over Harrison.
First off, I want to start off by saying you can like one guy and the other guy can still be really good, right? I mean, that's the problem. When you get into Twitter and X or whatever you want to call Reddit, everyone seems to think that whatever side you take on, that is the guy. I mean, that is your guy. You can't defer. They can't be good. Only one guy can be good. No. Well, you know what? I think the way the NFL is looking at these wide receivers, Harrison Jr., Neighbors, Rome Odunze, I think they think that they're a lot closer as far as draft capital is concerned than what maybe we make it in the media, right? I think the NFL values all three of these wide receivers. And I bet you if you go around and you take a look at all the NFL teams right now, there's going to be teams that have Harrison Jr. number one. There's going to be teams that have Neighbors number one. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's teams that have Odunze number one as well. So, I mean, we are blessed to have 3 really good wide receivers. That being said, I do have a type, and Malik Neighbors fits that bill. Explosive, yards after the catch. I mean, this is the kind of guy that I look at. I'm not looking at his pro day. Ooh and awed a lot of people there down in Baton Rouge, but I seen it on tape. There's a reason why I had Malik Neighbors as my wide receiver 1. Yes, that's right. Malik Neighbors is the top wide receiver for me. And it's not because I'm trying to be contradicting everything or trying to have a hot take. He just does things for me that are good regardless of who's throwing you the ball. Harrison Jr., they both win different ways. He's a big type wide receiver, 6'4", throw it up there and let him go get it. And he's going to get it. But Neighbors, he's a burner, change of direction. He's quick after the catch. He changes his direction so fluidly that, as soon as he's got the ball, he's like changing the direction and he's going to rack off. He can take a 5-yard pass and take it 40, where I don't think Harrison quite has that in him. You could throw the ball 60 yards in the air and he's going to come down with it. He's more of a contested catch guy, a big body. He's going to box people out in the red zone. They're going to get their fantasy points in different ways, but at the end of it, their production is going to be very similar. So for me, if you splice the DNA of Garrett Wilson with DJ Moore, you're going to get Malik Neighbors. That's what it comes down to. And for those out there, it's 6'4" versus 6 foot. But by the way, the new prototypical wide receiver is no longer 6'4", 220 pounds. Yeah. It's 6 foot, 200 pounds, which is what Malik Neighbors happens to be. Smaller wide receivers are becoming more and more successful in today's game. You're looking at size versus speed and how you want to win. And for me, Neighbors wins in more of the areas in which I'm looking for here as far as fantasy is concerned. Again, both wide receivers are going to be good. I just like what Neighbors can do after the ball is in his hands.
I think there's a lot of people out there, too, a lot of pundits that would tell you that it's Harrison, it's Neighbors. You brought up Odunze. I think you have Odunze third, but it's not a distant third, is it, Matt?
No. I think you can make an argument. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being the number 1 wide receiver take. I don't see it happening, but it wouldn't shock me because I know there's teams that have him, or we've heard there's teams that have him as their number 1 wide receiver on the board. It just happens to be whoever's picking at that point, right? Really, all a team needs is one team to fall in love with you, and that's how it's going to break down. We've seen some controversial decisions, Henry Ruggs over Justin Jefferson or Jalen Reagor. We've seen this kind of all play out in years past where not necessarily the best wide receiver is going to be the one taken, but there's certain teams that have a certain eye for certain types of traits, and that could dictate anything. Let's not forget about Brian Thomas. If Brian Thomas was more refined, I think he could make an argument of being the number 1 wide receiver in this class as well. I got him as wide receiver 4. We'll talk about that probably a little bit later as well. So yeah. I think we are privileged to have so many capable wide receivers in this year's class. Good wide receivers, good quarterbacks, not so good running backs. So, that's where it's going to drive the fantasy conversation towards the pass catchers.
We get excited, and deservedly so, about these 3 receivers. They're probably all going to go in the top 10 of the draft. I think the odds will dictate that right now. But we can't forget about the other first-round picks, including guys that I think have snuck into the back end of the first round, like Ladd McConkey, who ran a 4.39 40 at his pro day. This guy, I think a lot of people viewed a couple of months ago as second round, third round. Not so much anymore. This is a guy that could be drafted in the first round. At the end of it, we get very excited about that because the Kansas City Chiefs are drafting there. The Buffalo Bills are drafting there. And maybe he is not exactly setting the world on fire with one of those teams in 2024, but 2025 and beyond, there's some excitement there. Where do you stand on Ladd McConkey, Matt Donnelly?
I love Ladd McConkey. With Jim Nagy there down in the Senior Bowl, there's not a single dude out there that wanted anything to do with Ladd McConkey. No one wanted to line up across from him because he was going to make them look stupid. Arguably the best route runner in this class. He finds himself open. That means you're a must-have fantasy asset. If you can get open, a quarterback's going to find you, and that's what Ladd McConkey does. Probably better than everybody. You talk about PPR formats, he should be getting an extra boost here as far as that. I think you could squeeze him and make a justifiable case that he could be a wide receiver taking at the back end of the first round of your rookie drafts. Because, there's a smart team is, 111, 110, 111, 112. I could see it happening. I wouldn't be afraid to go there. He's a fighter. He's not going to break tackles because of his size, but it's not going to stop him. He's out there balling every single opportunity. a good team is going to find a way to use his speed and that elusiveness and that football IQ, and they're going to manufacture touches. And if you're going to get touches manufactured for you, you're going to produce. He's right in there with the same tier as Roman Wilson, Xavier Worthy, Keon Coleman. I mean, Troy Franklin, if you want to throw him into that conversation too, he's right there in that conversation at the wide receiver position. So there's a team picking the back end of the first round that has a need for a wide receiver that's going to get themselves open. He's going to end up there.
Ladd McConkey is an interesting guy because of what he might be able to do in the next few years in the league. A guy that has shown flashes in his first few years in the league. A guy I was very excited about before the start of last season, was it? I think it was before the start of last season, because I thought the Chargers are going to move on from Mike Williams prior to the 2023 season. They did not. And it hurt not having it hurt having Josh Palmer ready to explode, and then he had Mike Williams there. Now, Palmer still did have some really good games with Mike Williams when he went down. We mentioned how Keenan Allen missed 4 games last year as well. He's shown flashes, and he gets us very excited. Now he's probably even more exciting because Williams and Allen are gone, and it's Quentin Johnston, who didn't show us much in year one. And I know the Chargers are probably going to draft somebody, and they're probably going to be drafting somebody early. But where do you stand on Josh Palmer? Again, for all these people that are drafting in the never too early best ball tournaments or have to make dynasty cut down decisions and trying to figure out what they're going to do with Josh Palmer, where do you stand on Josh Palmer?
Well, I'm not going to badmouth a fellow Canadian. So shout out to Brampton, Ontario's Josh Palmer here right now. I love Palmer, man. I love a lot of the traits that he comes with, but I want to see what the Chargers do with that 5th pick. I mean, they could go multiple different ways here. Many are already predicting wide receiver there. Harrison Jr., Neighbors. I mean, that could change the narrative there. But that doesn't really seem like a John Harbaugh type selection, does it? I mean, you're talking Mike Williams, he's gone. Austin Eckler's gone. Keenan Allen's gone. In comes Gus Edwards and Will Dissly. He's ushering in a run-first type offense. Your pass-catching running back, he's gone. But no, I will say J.K. Dobbins does have a visit there, so that might change that narrative at the running back position, but probably not so much. The one thing that people forget about Herbert is he's been successful even if guys like Allen or Williams aren't there, because he has a fantastic ability to spread the ball around, which makes him harder to defend, which is why we saw Palmer have some success in a 10-game sample, which Allen wasn't there. Herbert still had 16 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, over 2,700 yards, and 93.7 passer rating. So just because Allen and Williams aren't there doesn't mean pass catchers cannot be successful in this Chargers offense. Now, I do think we're going to see them transition more run heavy with Gus Edwards there kind of driving that offense. But look, Williams, of those 10 games, Williams probably missed 6 of them. And I do like Palmer as a sleeper here this season, because if people remember, there was a really good cornerback there in Kansas City last season that basically shut down everybody in L'Jarius Sneed. Well, what happened when Josh Palmer came to town? 5 catches, 133 yards. So we know that the talent is going to be there. Josh Palmer has the talent. He doesn't have to worry about Keenan Allen. He's basically what we wanted Mike Williams to be if Mike Williams was healthy. So I think this is where we're looking at. They've already got their Mike Williams. If Quentin Johnston can give them anything, I don't think they're going to draft that wide receiver at 5. I can see the Chargers trading back, getting some more capital. Look at the offensive line. Look at the defense. I mean, so many different things that they could do. They've invested. They've got good enough wide receivers for what this offense wants to do, and that's going to be run first.
I think going back to a conversation we had earlier with Harrison and Neighbors, where you can like both players, but you can only put, if you're going to do rankings, you can only put one of them at 1, right? Yep. What about tight ends with Trey McBride and Sam Laporta? I think most people would tell you that Sam Laporta is the number 1 tight end for them right now in Dynasty. But I have to ask you where you stand on Trey McBride, because I think he should be in the conversation for that as well.
Are you stalking my social media by chance? Because if not, that's fine. I mean, if you are, that's even better. I mean, I've had this conversation, and I think my question went out there is Trey McBride ahead of Sam Laporta? If not, why not? I mean, I think you could definitely put him there. I do. I mean, you look at if he's already, we're not even into the draft yet. It's only April, and I've already got McBride for 100 catches guaranteed right now. Because Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, Zach Pascal? No, none of those guys do anything for me. Nothing. And again, we can make the argument, Marvin Harrison's going to end up in Arizona. I don't think so. We're also hearing that the Cardinals are one of the prime teams to trade back for a team looking for a quarterback. So there's no guarantee that they're going to get a Marvin Harrison at this point. If they trade back to 9, trade back to 10, depending on what they want to do here, because we know they can go out there and grab a Brian Thomas at 24 and still have a pretty good wide receiver. So the way I'm looking at this, the Cardinals are very interesting because a lot of this conversation could change when the draft is there. I mean, if Marvin Harrison's there, he's already guaranteed 130 targets. But I mean, I look at what Trey McBride does. He could have a very Evan Ingram type season next year where he leads the league in targets, for crying out loud. So I don't think that's out there. If you take a look at what McBride did after week 7, 6.6 receptions per game, 65.5 yards per game. He only had those 3 touchdowns, but if you project that, I mean, we're making projections here that may or may not happen, but if you would have taken those numbers and kind of projected them over the course of the season, that's 112 receptions. That would have been the second most of the tight end position. That's 1,113 yards. That would have led all tight ends along with 5 touchdowns. So the projection numbers there for McBride on that pace from week 7 on would suggest that you could make a case that he would be the top tight end as far as fantasy is concerned. Now, that's not saying that Laporte is bad, but you look at their circumstances, and right now, there's no one to challenge Laporte on this pecking order. In Detroit, you've still got a guy named Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's one of the top wide receivers in the game. You got an ascending wide receiver there in Jameson Williams, who basically made, in my opinion, Josh Reynolds expendable. So you look at this, I think the competition for targets favors McBride a little bit, and what we saw in the back half of the season also speaks well.
This might be an opportunity, if you are a believer in McBride and you have Laporta, why not offer Laporta and get McBride plus a pick, McBride plus a player. I mean, you could come out ahead of that, even though you might be giving up the best player in the deal. You might end up coming out ahead on the trade. I think that's something that's interesting too. I bring this up all the time on this show, Matt. Kyle Pitts has basically been incredibly polarizing by a lot of FFPC players. Literally every single year he's in the league. Tight end premium format, all the athleticism in the world, pedigreed guy, high draft pick, and every year it seems like you either love him or hate him. And he continues to go high every year because there's always those people in the draft that love him that are going to take him high. He has the benefit of playing with a real quarterback this year in Kirk Cousins. They brought in Darnell Mooney, did Atlanta. There's no Arthur Smith there anymore. Bijan Robinson in year 2, but I think the biggest thing is Kirk Cousins. So the thing that we have to ask here, where do you stand in 2024 on Kyle Pitts? And we'll expand it out to Kirk Cousins in this Falcons offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's okay to love again. I really do. I mean, we've been burnt so many times by Kyle Pitts and our love affair with him. But what it comes down to, I think Cousins automatically bumps him up. And it's not because Kirk Cousins is a real quarterback. Kirk Cousins is a real tight end quarterback. Mm-hmm. Look at what he did. TJ Hawkinson, 960 yards with Kirk Cousins under center. If you want to take that further, go back to Cousins' days in Washington, where Jordan Reed also flirted with 1,000-yard seasons. So Kirk Cousins does like his tight ends. And I'll talk about some of those numbers here in just a second. But the one concern I do have is Kirk Cousins basically, I mean, I think you caught that little bit of banter back and forth. Kirk Cousins is number 8. Kyle Pitts is number 8. And Kyle Pitts said, hey, I'll give him my number 8, but I want a few targets. Ha, 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 ha. Well, guess what? Kirk Cousins was number 18, so make of that what you will. So maybe he's not going to give Kyle Pitts those targets. But when was the last time that we saw Kyle Pitts healthy? His rookie season. I mean, he had that surgery there that ended his 2022 season there. He had off-season surgery in 2023. Right now, he should be back to full strength. So I think that's something that we got to remember because we forget that he's hurt. We forget what some of these players are playing throughout the season. And you know what? It really fogs our fantasy lenses because we want production. We want those points, and we don't necessarily get those points because the guy's battling an injury. I didn't even know he had a PCL worked on this season. I thought it was just the MCL, but the PCL factored into it as well. I don't remember that coming out at all last season. And I kind of scour the internet there a little bit. And one of my guys I like to check out is Jacob Gibbs. And he pointed out that if you remove last season from Kyle Pitts, the equation, and you take years 1 and number 2, Pitts is 1,382 yards over that 27-game sample. That is the 7th most. Well, he also had the most off-target rate throws in the league. We're talking Desmond Ridder. We're talking Marcus Mariota. I mean, the dude's catching insane amount of passes, producing so many yards, and not a damn ball's catchable. I mean, that should tell you about everything you need to know. Pitts was also targeted on 23.4% of his routes run, 1.93 yards per route. That's right up there with Travis Kelce and George Kittle. He's also the only Falcons rookie in franchise history to have that 1,000-yard rookie season, second tight end in NFL history with 1,000 yards as a rookie. And here's the one I love the most. Kirk Cousins, his target share to tight ends last season, 27%. I think we're okay to love again. I think I'm ready. And if I get hurt again, this one's 100% on me. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, that's on me. Fool me 3 times, I'm just going to quit altogether. We're number 3 right now.
If you were in an FFPC dynasty league with tight end premium and you had a late first-round pick, Matt, would you offer it straight up to try to get Kyle Pitts in a 1-for-1 deal?
I think I would. I really do. I think we know what his potential is. We saw that as a rookie with no real quarterback there. If we're talking tight end premium, I mean, that boosts things up here. I really think we're going to see Kyle Pitts flirt with 1,000 yards again this season. I like what Atlanta's doing. You can't just set people in the back because Bijan Robinson, he can run the ball as well as anybody. You've got Darnell Mooney who's going to stretch the field. You've got Drake London out there. You've got the aforementioned Kyle Pitts. So there's so many weapons. You can't just double a guy anymore. And with Kirk Cousins throwing and distributing the ball, I mean, I really like what this Falcons offense does, and that's going to translate well for Kyle Pitts. I mean, it can't be any worse, can it?
It can't be worse. You're right. Exactly right. DG is on the YT. He says he's loving the tight end talk tonight. Do we like Dalton Schultz, Dalton Kincaid, Jake Ferguson just as much? I don't like any of those guys, even almost as much as McBride or Laporta. But I think all 3 of those guys are interesting, you know, especially with Buffalo had the opportunity to make a big splash in free agency, and they got Matt Collins and Curtis Samuel. We'll talk about Curtis Samuel in a little bit, but there was nobody. It's not like that's exciting to me. Like I like Diggs and I like Kincaid there as the 2 target monsters. So I think I like him. I know Schultz re-signed. He should be okay, but it's not a needle moving move. And Ferguson is interesting too, but I do wonder if last year was the career year. And we're going to see a little bit of a regression to the mean there. I think Kincaid is the only guy out of those 3 that I'm excited about, but I think the other guys are definitely palatable. Matt, how do you feel about those 3 players? Schultz, Kincaid, and Ferguson.
Kincaid's got the most upside. I mean, I'm really interested to see what Buffalo does in this draft because I could see them going out there and getting a wide receiver at the back end of the draft as well to go opposite of Stephon Diggs. We know Curtis Samuel's already there. Curtis Samuel, 74% of his routes last season were out of the slot. I probably should have saved that tidbit for a little bit later. But you look at it, they could use another wide receiver opposite of Stephon Diggs for the most part. And I think that could cut into Kincaid's numbers a little bit. Ferguson, Dak Prescott loves tight ends. He loves throwing this to his tight ends. These are all guys that are going to be in that tight end 10 to tight end 14 range. So they're all going to have value there. They're all going to be right there. You can have them in, you can argue that any one of them could be a tight end 1. They're probably, like I said, Kincaid has the most upside, the best, in my opinion, the best quarterback, but I think Ferguson's probably going to get the most targets from Dak Prescott there because Dak Prescott's going to want to get that contract and cost the Cowboys even more money with the whole situation going on there in Dallas. As far as Dalton Schultz is a nice, solid tight end, a guy that you're going to be able to get in your draft much, much, much later than these other guys, and a guy who's going to produce tight end 1 type numbers. So I do like him for that reason.
Let's move on and talk about running backs here. Josh Jacobs is the first guy I want to bring up. Kind of a weird thing in free agency with the Packers. It seemed like they were going to sign Aaron Jones, or they were going to keep Aaron Jones. He didn't agree to a pay cut for the 2nd straight year. They let him go. They move on Josh Jacobs. Aaron Jones now in Minnesota. But Jacobs, a guy who is, 26 years old, led the league in rushing 2 years ago. I really don't I don't put a whole lot of stock into what he did last year because he missed a good portion of training camp, because the coaching staff was bad, got fired, because he couldn't get any consistency at quarterback. Like, it wasn't a great offense. He did what he could. But, man, Josh Jacobs in Green Bay now, at least for 1 year, maybe 2 years, maybe more than that, we'll see. The pass-catching chops, the fact that this guy is bigger, more thicker than Aaron Jones is going to allow the Packers to do, I think, a little bit more with Jacobs than they could with Jones. I'm very bullish on this move. Very excited about Josh Jacobs in Green Bay. Matt, do you feel the same way?
I hate it. I'm a Raiders fan. I hate it. This one hurt. This one really hurt. I mean, but you look at this Packers offense. Josh Jacobs and Jordan Love are the elder spokespeople of this offense. They're 25 and 26 years old, respectively. Everyone else, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, Bo Melton, they're 24 or under. So this offense is probably the best young offense in the league. I mean, you want to talk about players under 25. This entire offense is under 25 outside of maybe the quarterback and Josh Jacobs. 5 seasons with the Raiders, 1,305 carries, 5,545 rushing yards. He added extra 1,450 yards in the passing game, showing more passing chops here in the last couple seasons than maybe the first 3 seasons there, because at first no one really wanted to give him a pass, right? I mean, he didn't get a whole lot of passes there in those first 3 careers. He's a great back, but I do worry about a little bit last year. There's some things here that kind of got me a little bit. That explosive run rate, that dipped to 3.9%, which is rated 48 out of 49 running backs last season. I mean, we could count for missed training camp and a poor offense for some of that, but that's a 48 out of 49. That's not good. His yards per carry, that ranked 44th at 3.5 yards. His yards after contact per carry, that dropped to 46, where he averages 2.4 yards per attempt, while his forced missed tackle rate, 0.12, that was tied for 43rd amongst 49 qualified running backs. So I could see why the Raiders were a little hesitant after putting that tag on him to bring him back, especially what we saw from Zamir White, who played in that same offense and didn't get many touches until late in the season, but he was definitely more efficient, more explosive than Jacobs had been. So, I mean, I could see both sides. I mean, Jacobs basically, he is an AP kind of guy. You know, Antonio Pierce wanted to keep him around there. I mean, he loved everything about Pierce and Jacobs and all. I mean, it was a perfect match between the two of them here. But I think Jacobs there in Green Bay could be a top 12 running back. Again, he's going to be in that 10 to 15 range when we talk about it. I'm not going to get upset if someone takes him as a he's definitely going to be, you could have him as an RB1 on your team. He could be that anchor running back, right? It's just A.J. Dillon there. But yeah, you're right. He is everything they wanted out of Aaron Jones, except he's a much better runner of the ball.
Yeah.
And that's saying something, because there was times there the last 5 games of the season when Aaron Jones was finally healthy, where Aaron Jones looked pretty damn good himself. So, I mean, it was an interesting thing, but you know what? Damn you, Packers. I mean, how can you ask someone to take a pay cut 2 years in a row? Seriously.
Well, I'll tell you what. So I live, and Matt, I don't know if you know this, I live like 20 miles southwest of Green Bay. And a lot of the people that I talk to up here, like fans and everything, were just, their hearts were broken that Aaron Jones, because he's Mr. Packer. Like he was
absolutely.
the guy. You know, everybody loved him here. But he was a guy that these soft tissue injuries, man, it's not like they were going away. They were getting worse. He got hurt 3 times last year. Nobody remembers the 3rd time because it was they lost to the Niners, but he wouldn't have been able to play in the NFC Championship game the following week. So I think while he was electric at the end of the season, you got to understand that he's going to be 30 years old this year. And it just seemed like his body is not cooperating the way that Josh Jacobs' body might cooperate, given that he's 4 years younger and given the pounding that Jacobs could take that, quite frankly, Aaron Jones never could, and have A.J. Dillon take on some of that too. So I think, and the whole thing with like taking a pay cut 2 years in a row, they signed him to such an insane deal that
they did. He got paid.
And you knew that this, he was never going to see this money. Like it was going to, and I think he made the right decision last year. And if it's a financial thing, I think he made the right decision this year. I compared it to Aaron Jones last year, got paid what, $6-7 million, maybe even more than that. He ended up taking a pay cut. Dalvin Cook did not take a pay cut when the Vikings were willing to keep him on the roster. Dalvin Cook doesn't take the pay cut. He gets released. He goes to the Jets, does nothing, and now he's not making any money. Whereas Aaron Jones made money last year, and he's getting paid again this year too with Minnesota. Could be the last year he gets paid, but I like the way that Aaron Jones did this from a financial standpoint. Okay, last thing I want to bring up. I'm going to put you on the spot here. You have the number 1 pick in a rookie superflex draft, okay? The number 1 pick in a rookie superflex draft. It's going off tonight. So you don't know where these guys, where Jaden Daniels is going to go. Where would you, or who would you take at the 101 in this rookie superflex draft? Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels?
Man, I would love to trade back if possible, but I'll say it right now. I'll be that guy. I'm taking Jaden Daniels. I mean, much like the Neighbors Harrison conversation, you're getting 2 great quarterbacks here. today's game, we're talking fantasy here, right? We're talking Superflex, we're talking fantasy. I'm going to give the edge to Daniels here because the NFL's basically said, and we've heard this whole conversation, that Justin Fields is crap as an NFL quarterback, right? We got the message loud and clear. No one wanted to pay up to get him on their team. He ended up being a 6th-round throw-in or however you want to look at that. And yet, somehow this crappy quarterback was a top 10 fantasy asset at the quarterback position. So even if Jaden Daniels is not as good as I think he's going to be, which, by the way, I think he's pretty damn good, he's still going to light it up as far as fantasy is concerned. Now, I talked about the DNA there of Malik Neighbors. If you cross it up with Garrett Wilson and DJ Moore, well, you know what? The DNA of Jaden Daniels is pretty simple. He's basically Kyler Murray spliced with Anthony Richardson. There we go. I'm a geneticist here. I'm going to tell you exactly. That's why I have this LSU product way up where he is. There's plenty to like about Daniels. Like last season, he proved that he can do it all. He's not just a set of legs out there, people. He's not just a set of legs. He completed 72% of his passes while throwing for over 3,800 yards and casually tossing 40 touchdowns. You don't just casually do that if you're just a running quarterback. Yeah. You are a quarterback that can do it all in the SEC. And say what you want about the SEC, maybe not being as good as it has been in previous years, then maybe it's overrated. It's still the SEC. You're still playing the Alabamas. You're still playing the Georgias. And this is what he's doing to these teams. His deep ball accuracy, 64%, 22 touchdowns. That's right up there with any quarterback that you consider elite in the National Football League. His ability to create yards after whenever things break down, that's a bonus. That is an absolute bonus. That's why he's, to me, the top prospect. I know Caleb Williams, he can do it too. He's a mobile quarterback. He's a little bit bigger. He's a little bit thicker, but he doesn't do it the way that Daniels does it. He is exciting to watch out. Now, people will point out that he's 24 when his rookie year comes in. No one cares about age anymore. They really don't. These quarterbacks are playing until they're 40 years old. So, I want a guy that's going to give me some good years off the hop. I don't care if he's going to play 15 years. Give me 10 solid years and I'll be more than happy. 5-year starter, people. 5-year starter. Even at Arizona State, he was still productive to a degree. So for me, again, I'm not saying that Caleb Williams is going to be a bust, but I do like Daniels here over Williams. I think there's some good quarterbacks here to have a conversation about. I think we're, again, like the wide receiver position. I think J.J. McCarthy is going to be solid. I think Drake May is underrated. I think we are getting that prospect fatigue out of Drake May right now because everyone's kind of pushed him back. He's probably got the best pocket presence. He's probably the best pocket quarterback in this draft. And guess what? Pocket quarterbacks, they're still successful in the NFL. That's why I think J.J. McCarthy, and I think the whole conversation about how good he is, I don't know if we know how good he can be. I think he hasn't even come close to where he's going to get. So we'll talk about that when we talk about the rookies because I do have a little bit of fun to have with that.
I think, speaking of fun, this NFL draft is going to be so bonkers. We could have 4 quarterbacks, 3 receivers, and a tight end go in the top 10 picks.
Top
That's
10.
8 skilled position players in the top 10. That'd be crazy if we see that. The conversation about the rookies as well as all the free agency fallout is just beginning. He's Matt Donnelly from the Dynasty Vipers Network on YouTube. Of course, check out his work at Fantasy Pros and Rotoballer. Matt Donnelly at Matt Donnelly FF on the X. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. Let's find out what's going to happen to players like Tony Pollard, T. Higgins, Russell Wilson, and Justin Fields. I think that's another interesting conversation as well. Let's find out what's going to happen to these players when we come back. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show rolls on next.
Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament is already open right now over at FFPC. Drafts are available daily, 2-hour clock or 6-hour clock, or the sit and go 30-second clock if you really just want to bang out a draft. Those are scheduled in advance, so you can go get set up on that. Take a shot either $25,000 or $10,000 grand prize. That's in the Never Too Early Best Ball contest. They got some big prizes over there, man. And you can play high stakes games over there too. So you can hit this QR code that's right in front of my face or go to myffpc.com. Use promo code COOP, COOP. They'll give you $25 off when you deposit $35 or more. So go get set up right now. We're doing, we already do our dynasty. We do our redrafts over there. We do our high stakes stuff. But we do the playoff contest. We do it all. So I'm going to get in on the best ball too. It's never, for me, whatever you got, whatever contest you got, I'm going to play, I'm going to win. That's it. So go over to myffpc.com, use promo code COOP, and you can win as well.
9 minutes past the top of the hour here on the Better Sports Network. You're watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show presented by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. Hey, that's me. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC at Eric Balkman on the X, HSFF Hour, and of course the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. Joined by Matt Donnelly at Matt Donnelly FF. Matt Donnelly from the Dynasty Vipers Network, and of course Fantasy Points and Rotoballer. I want to talk about Empire Leagues here with the FFPC. It's something we just rolled out this week. Now it's very similar to our Dynasty Leagues. However, Empire Leagues have a larger progressive prize pool that gets bigger every single year. It's only awarded when there's a back-to-back winner. So in other words, you win the league, congratulations, you get half the pot. However, if you win the league 2 years in a row, then you win that entire Empire prize pool, and then the league disbands. And if you stay in that league until it disbands, you get your deposit back, which is another nice feature of that. Check out Empire Leagues. We only have them at the $100 level right now. We might be adding more later. And that QR code that just popped up on the screen, thanks to our producer, Matt Deutsch, just popped up. You can scan that. That will take you to the page, and you can register for your league. We already had one league fill up, I think, within, I don't know, 2 hours or something after we added it onto the page. So it's going to be awesome. The Empire Leagues are something we're very excited about, very passionate about, and I think you will be too. So check that out, myffpc.com, or just simply scan that QR code on the bottom of the screen. So Empire Leagues, I think, are fun. Dynasty Leagues are obviously fun. It's fun to prognosticate. As fun as it is to evaluate players, Matt, it's also fun to prognosticate about what players could be joining these teams. The Dallas Cowboys in the 2024 draft have the 24th pick overall. They're not taking a running back there. However, they have the 56th pick. And they have the 87th pick. That's round 2 and that's round 3. Now, if they take a running back, how excited would you be for that running back for fantasy? Because outside of Rico Dowdle, there's nobody else there. I mean, Deuce Vaughn, who is kind of a gadget guy, that's it. And if they take a running back on day 2, sky's the limit. How excited are you for the Cowboys there? How closely are you watching that situation? What's going to happen there?
Well, you forgot to mention Malik Davis and Snoop Connor. I mean, how can't you get excited about this Dallas Cowboys backfield? I mean, you can't even go to free agency and get excited. We know J.K. Dobbins, he's visiting the Chargers. But what are they going to do? Bring back Ezekiel Elliott? Take a shot at Cam Akers? Actually, I don't mind that. I don't mind the idea of taking a shot at Cam Akers. But Kareem Hunt, Rashad Penny, I mean, no. This running back that they potentially could select, and we've heard ties to Jordan Brooks already from the University of Texas, right there in Jerry's backyard. I mean, I talk about how this is not a very good running back class. For me, none of these running backs are setting themselves up as the RB1. I've got my RB1 in Braylon Allen. That's kind of my guy right now. I mean, the dude broke out at 17 years old. He's still 20 years old when he's going to get drafted. I don't think the NFL's had a 20-year-old ball carrier in like 60 years, for crying out loud. So, right. I mean, I do like Braylon Allen, but I mean, Jordan Brooks ending up with the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, that just feels like something that's going to happen. And if that does happen, Brooksy, he becomes one of the top running backs in this rookie class. I mean, he shoots himself right up in there into RB2 type numbers, maybe RB21, RB20, as far as fantasy is concerned. Some guy you can plug in there as your RB2 and feel pretty confident that he's going to produce at some point, because we've seen running backs produce for the Dallas Cowboys. Now, Tony Pollard wasn't that guy. His numbers are much better. He's much more efficient when he's got an ability to split that workload. And I think that's key. I think Jordan Brooks is one of those guys who can carry the load. We know Blake Corum can carry the load if given an opportunity. All the dude does is carry the ball. I mean, so whoever ends up with the Dallas Cowboys at the running back position definitely, I think, has that inside track as far as rookie running backs are concerned for this year's draft class.
I think that the other thing that makes it exciting, and I kind of poo-pooed this, but I think the fact that the Cowboys did re-sign Dowdle, it's kind of like why I feel good about Zamir White for the Raiders. They signed Alexander Madison. Yeah, they could still draft somebody, I get it, but they went out and signed Madison. To me, that's not a huge threat to Zamir White. To me, if the Cowboys utilize a day 2 pick on a running back, Rico Dowdle is not a huge threat to that. Now, whether it's Jonathan Brooks, Braylon Allen, whether it's Trey Benson or somebody like that, yeah, they're probably going to be in a committee, but they should be the lead guy in that committee. And a lead guy in a committee in that offense is something we will be excited about for not only dynasty leagues, but redraft leagues as well. You mentioned Tony Pollard.
Sorry, I love that you mentioned Alexander Madison there, because I remember last season, and I'd have to pull up the receipts. I said, he's not even the best pass. Everyone's like, oh, he's getting all this work. He's going to get all this work. I'm like, he's not even the best pass catcher in this backfield. That's Ty Chandler. And what ended up happening, I could pull the receipts out there, but I'm lazy. I don't want to go back.
Yeah, no, it's no way to live.
Yeah,
it's no way to live. Tony Pollard, you mentioned him talking about what he was able to do with the Cowboys so successfully when he had a running mate. Now his running mate in Tennessee is going to be Tyjae Spears. The thing I keep coming back to with Pollard, and maybe I'm overrating this, but he did an interview, and I can't remember who it was, but it was in December. And he said he was just starting to feel in December that he was over that awful injury at the end of the 2022 season. And I'm thinking, like, man, if he didn't feel, now regardless of how healed it was, I don't know. But if that's in your mind, I mean, like, that's playing a role in your performance. If you're thinking about that injury, you're thinking, and you should just be reacting when you're playing at this level. Pollard now goes to Tennessee. It's a downgrade, not financially for him, but it's a downgrade for the offensive line and the offense in general. What's going to happen to Tony Pollard, the Titan, this year, Matt?
I like this move for the Titans. I like this move for Tony Pollard. I really do. I think this is a good move for Tyjae Spears. I think they're going to play off each other pretty nicely. I mean, they're both a little bit undersized, but saying that, I mean, I think they both can be effective. I think they both do better with less touches. I really do. Now, going to Tony Pollard's point, the first 10 weeks of the season, I get it. He didn't do a whole heck of a lot of nothing. I mean, a lot of us had Tony Pollard as that guy, right? Going into the season, we're like, all right, this is Tony Pollard's time. No Ezekiel Elliott, yada, yada. First 10 weeks, absolutely nothing. And then you mentioned that comment that he made that he didn't quite feel right until the back end of the season. Well, if you look at weeks 11 through 18, we take those splits, 90.8 rushing grade there. That was one of the tops amongst the running back position. His yards after contact per attempt, 3.2. That was 13th. And then you look at his first down touchdown rate, that was 24.8%, also 13th. He was 5th in avoided tackles per attempt at 0.29 during the final 8 weeks of the season. So maybe there is something to this whole Pollard wasn't himself until the back end of the season, because the numbers certainly tell that story if we look at the splits. Now, he brings those splits to Tennessee, and I think the Titans, hey, let's call it the way it is. This Titans offense is a lot better than people are thinking right now. I mean, they went out there, they got Calvin Ridley, they've got Tony Pollard, they got Spears, they got Hopkins, they got their slot receiver there in Treylon Burks. I mean, they're a pretty good team. Say what you want about Treylon Burks. There's a reason why he was drafted as high. He does have the talent. We just haven't seen that promise equal production at any point yet. And then what Pollard does add to this, 176 receptions over his 5 seasons, 1,318 receiving yards. So you've got yourself another pass catcher, which is something that the Titans simply haven't been able to do. I love this move for Will Levis. I love this offense for Will Levis. But let's not forget, you talk about the Dallas Cowboys. The Titans, they're going to continue to be a running team. 108 yards last season per game. Second-year quarterback. I mean, their passing offense, I think it was the 4th worst last season. So Pollard's going to get his in the running game. That's still going to be a thing. He's still going to contribute there in the passing game. So for Pollard, I do like this number. I think he's a solid RB2 next season. I think he's, again, in that range of outcomes where he could be a top 12 running back. He could be that one running back that we are downgrading, much like we've done with Jacobs in years past, where he could be ADP has about RB20, where he could be the RB10, right? I mean, there is potential for him to be that in this offense. We've seen what Derrick Henry has been able to do. I'm not saying that Tony Pollard is Derrick Henry, but if these splits are telling us anything, then, hey, you know what? There is potential there.
Do you think that the addition of Calvin Ridley, and obviously they're keeping Hopkins around, does that signal any kind of shift in philosophy? Clearly it doesn't. You still think that they're going to be running the ball. Maybe Levis isn't just ready to let it loose yet?
I think that's probably what it is. I think they're putting him in a position to move towards that as the season progresses. But I think Tony Pollard can catch the ball out of the backfield, which is going to help his cause there as well. Tyjae Spears, I think this offense is going to be a lot better than people give it credit for. So when I look at this team, I think Tony Pollard does have some potential, and I would take a shot at him. But again, it's all relative of where you're getting him. I'm not going to draft him before round 6 as far as fantasy is concerned. I'm just not going to reach, right?
Right. Okay. Brandon Ayuk is an interesting cat right now. He might be on the Niners. He might not be. He scrubbed I think he scrubbed his socials with of all the Niners mentions, which I guess I don't know why I should care about that anymore. It's just, it seems like everybody does that. Do you have any insight on what's going on there? Do you have any feelings one way or the other of where Brandon Ayuk is going to be playing in 2024? What's going to happen with Brandon Ayuk? Because if you have a take on this, there should be some actionable dynasty advice here.
If Brandon Ayuk goes anywhere, I don't care where, except maybe New England, I'm getting myself some Brandon Ayuk. I love Brandon Ayuk. I love him more than anybody else out there right now. My understanding, the latest rumors out there are the 49ers are looking towards an extension for him. At least that's the talk out there from John Lynch. Hey, we also seen today's day and age and how players try and leverage. I think there's that money talks, BS walks type tweet that went out there on Instagram, which was, isn't that exactly what Antonio Pierce said to Josh Jacobs? I mean, I'm not going to say Brandon Ayuk's going to be a Raider, but I'm not saying it either. I'm also not saying that Mike Tomlin may be Brandon Ayuk's dad if you look at the side-by-side pictures. I mean, Tomlin has some explaining to do. I know Ayuk said, hey, twinsies? I'm like, oh, no, that looks like father-son type thing there. But, hey, we've all heard the rumors. Every team in the NFL should be lining up to get Brandon Ayuk. This is a guy that has produced back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, 1,342 yards last season, 7th most. 75 targets, that was tied for 31st. Give the man some damn targets. It's that simple. We're putting up 1,300 yards on just 75 targets. One of the best yards after the catch guys in the league. And he's doing this with Brock Purdy. Say what you will about Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy's still Brock Purdy. But he's doing this with Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey. There is some talent around Brandon Ayuk, and this is what he is producing. You can build around Brandon Ayuk. He can be a wide receiver one for any team out there. So wherever he goes, I'm going for him in fantasy, and I'm probably willing to pay the piper.
We were having this conversation, and I can't remember who it was with, but we were talking about being a number 2 receiver on a really good offense or a number 1 receiver on a mediocre or not great offense. And I think you could make the case that that's what could happen with Ayuk. Maybe he goes to another team that's not as good as San Francisco as far as their offense goes, becomes the number 1 receiver, and he's still putting up good enough numbers for you. I think that is what could be happening with T. Higgins. It's just a question of, does it happen in 2024 or does it happen in 2025? Now, Higgins has already requested a trade. He's been tagged by the team. Apparently, there's been no discussions about a long-term deal. And, the Bengals are going to have a lot of money tied up in Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow here, so they can't just be throwing around these massive contracts. What do we do for Dynasty with T. Higgins right now, knowing that he's probably going to be a Bengal in 2024, but after that, it's anybody's guess, right, Matt?
Well, if I could trade T. Higgins for Brandon Ayuk, I'm making that move right now because Brandon Ayuk, he's going to get paid either by the 49ers or by someone else. Very similar type situations there. I'm not convinced that the Bengals are going to trade him, even though the request was made. Business is business. Hoyer was probably hoping that this would bring everyone back to the table. The thing is, for the Bengals, the whole contract has already been put out there. Look at Michael Pittman's contract. That's exactly the contract that you should be working with T. Higgins here. Like a 3-year deal, $71.5 million, 46 guaranteed. Pretty simple. I mean, if they want to get this deal done, that's the deal that they need to be putting out there. For me, I think I'd rather have Michael Pittman over T. Higgins. Maybe that's a hot take. I don't know, but I do like I like Michael Pittman a lot. And that's saying something because I'm not usually a big fan of USC wide receivers, but hey, that's for another show, another day. Now, all right, we look at this and there's some teams out there that could use a Higgins guy. I mean, he's already talked about reuniting with Trevor Lawrence there in Duval County, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, CJ Stroud. I'd love to play for any of those quarterbacks. The problem is the Bengals, they're not going to trade you to any of those teams. Why would they? I don't care what the compensation is going to be. You're never going to get your value when you trade a wide receiver. Look at some of these wide receiver trades. You're not going to get, not very often, a first-round pick. You're not going to get a good return on investment if you trade a wide receiver. Why would you strengthen one of the teams that you have to go through to get to the Super Bowl? It makes zero sense. I don't care if they have the best offer. I'm not going to strengthen my opponent. And that's why I think T. Higgins is not going anywhere this year. And, young fella, you got to be careful what you ask for, because I know a couple other needy wide receiver teams that could give you money in the New York Giants and the Carolina Panthers that have no effect on the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah.
You're probably not going to go there. So let's careful here a little bit.
Yeah, especially if he ends up winning a Super Bowl or something, or even getting to a Super Bowl this year, be a second Super Bowl with the Bengals. I think that'd be pretty compelling to see what he would want to do in the offseason then. The Bengals share a state with the Cleveland Browns, and the Cleveland Browns, to me, have put me in a state of confusion because I don't know what's going on here. So Deshaun Watson, let's talk about him first. He is coming back. He's supposed to start throwing this month. I don't know. I doubt Joe Flacco is going to be back since they signed Jameis Winston to be the backup there. Amari Cooper, David Njoku. Njoku's interesting because he had a really good season last year, but the bulk of his really good games were with Flacco throwing to him and not Watson. And then Nick Chubb's coming off the injury, and they just signed Deontay Foreman as well. But the thing that's really, really confused me, Jerry Jeudy, they didn't have to give him an extension. They give him a 3-year extension after they give up a couple of draft picks to get him from Denver. It's worth up to $58 million. That's funny money, but $41 million guaranteed for Jerry Jeudy to be your number 2 receiver. What's going to happen to the Cleveland Browns passing offense this year? Because there is a lot of moving parts, and I'm just trying to make sense of it, Matt.
Man, I'm afraid that this is going to tell us probably more about Nick Chubb than anything else. I mean, if we're seeing a transition to more of a passing style offense, I mean, listen, even after the Browns lost Chubb to injury last season, they still ran the ball 518 times. That was the 4th most in the NFL without Nick Chubb, right? Over the last 4 seasons, the Browns' pass play rate, 28th at 56.5%. There's plenty of competition for targets here. I mean, there's very few targets and plenty of competition. I can't see this team making that big of a swing from a heavy run-first team to a pass-first team. I mean, the weapons are there. You should have the quarterback in Deshaun Watson, but, I mean, I'm scared that this says more about Nick Chubb and where his health is than anything else. I hope I'm wrong. I hope Nick Chubb is back, because if Chubb is back and he's healthy, this passing offense is not going to be. It's going to be non-existent. It's going to be Amari Cooper. It's going to be David Njoku. Elijah Moore is not going to get in there. Jerry Jeudy is going to continue not doing anything, and you're going to go with Njoku, Cooper, and Chubb. So
we should not follow the money with Jeudy, right?
No. Sometimes rich people do stupid things with their money. Hey, everyone's entitled. Everyone's entitled to doing it. I think. Hey, we've seen guys in the NFL get those big contracts and go blow a bunch of stupid money on something. Was it Landon Dickerson here that just the other day got that big 4-year, $84 million contract, and his big purchase was a 0-degree lawnmower?
Right. Yes.
There's my kind of guy. He bought himself a $5,000 lawnmower. That was his purchase. Cleveland, I don't know what you're thinking, but Jerry Jeudy is not the answer.
I want to go from one up passing offense to another in Buffalo. I don't say has a lot of moving pieces, because it's still Allen, it's still Diggs, it's still Kincaid. Khalil Shakir is still there as well. But Gabe Davis is no more. He's in Jacksonville. They've added Matt Collins, and they've added Curtis Samuel. You dropped a little nugget in the first hour on Samuel. You can revisit that, because I think the new audience would appreciate it. But Curtis Samuel in Buffalo, what's going to happen to him this year?
Oh, man. I know our guy Matt Harmon there with Reception Perception. He is a huge Curtis Samuel fan. He loves this move. I mean, listen, with the addition of Samuel to Buffalo, you're reuniting a offensive coordinator with one of his favorite chess pieces of all time. That's right. Joe Brady, Curtis Samuel, they were together back in Carolina when Samuel had some of his best seasons there. And we're looking at this. He hauled in, I think, 77 of 97 targets for 850 yards, while also having like 41 rushes and another 200 yards. So he dang near had 1,000 yards in Carolina. Now, looking deeper into those numbers there, Samuel finished with a 79% catch rate there, lining up everywhere on the field, even though 74% of his recent times there with Washington have been out of the slot. He still managed to average career highs in yards per route run at 2.1 and yards after the catch with 348 of those with Joe Brady. Now, last season, I talked about that slot number, 613 yards, 62 receptions, 91 targets. That was the 4th time in 5 seasons in which he's seen at least 90 targets. I can see him seeing 90 targets again with Josh Allen this season. His targets per route run, that was the most on the team at 22.3%. his 18% target share, that was like right there. It was like, I think, second on the team. His explosive play rate there was 16.3, yards per route run, 1.53. That is all great news for Josh Allen, because I'll tell you this right now, Gabriel Davis didn't do none of that, right?
Yeah.
Gabriel Davis, we saw a glimmer of potential in that Kansas City Chiefs game that we started blowing him way out of proportion, putting him as a wide receiver 2, when in reality, he's a wide receiver 4. So I do like what Samuel brings to this offense. Explosive speed, ability to make plays after the catch, a trusted target, an option outside of Stephon Diggs, who may or may not be a Buffalo Bill, depending on what tea leaves you're reading. So I think that this is a great move for the Bills and for Curtis Samuel. He's going to be a solid flex option, no matter how you want to put it. Maybe not necessarily a wide receiver 2, but a guy you can trust in your flex.
What about the situation going on in Pittsburgh right now? With the FFPC dynasty leagues, the benches are not big. I mean, especially with cut downs, like it's tough to keep a guy like Justin Fields around. It wasn't that long ago he was a top 15 pick in the NFL, and he was a starting quarterback literally every year he's been in the league. Now he's going to be a backup in Pittsburgh. If you have a short bench dynasty league, can you afford to keep Justin Fields on there as a backup quarterback to Russell Wilson? Or is there more than meets the eye there? Is there a real potential that Fields could take over for Wilson at some point this season? What's going to happen with the Pittsburgh quarterbacks this year?
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting dilemma. I think Russell Wilson stays the quarterback throughout the season because there's too many weapons for him not to succeed, right? I mean, you got George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, Najee Harris, you got Jalen Warren. Pittsburgh is going to be a run-first team and asking Wilson not to lose the game for them. But, I mean, if he screws up, they've got no money invested in him, $1.2 million. Justin Fields only has 3.23 guaranteed, so they don't have a lot of money invested in the quarterback position. I think Russell Wilson's QB 56 when it comes to his 2024 cap hit. So, really, they have no real, hey, we're going to stick with you because we got money spent into you. So, I don't see that happening. But I don't think Wilson's going to struggle either with this Pittsburgh Steelers offense. Heck, Mason, if you can't win with this Pittsburgh Steelers team, a team that was winning with Mason Rudolph, then you don't even deserve to be in the lineup to begin with. So if you're in a short bench, I'm sorry, I don't see Justin Fields being that guy this season. I think what the Steelers are hoping for is if something were to happen to Wilson, they have another quarterback to put in there. That's an upgrade on Mason Rudolph. That's an upgrade on Kenny Pickett. And then from there, maybe trying to recoup some of the value. I think some team is going to take a shot potentially at Justin Fields if he becomes a free agent. Mm-hmm. Maybe they could trade him for more than that 6th-round pick come next year at the draft, depending on how that all kind of works out. But, yeah, I don't see Fields coming in there short of an injury to Russell Wilson this season.
I want to keep it on the quarterback discussion here and move briefly through this. J.J. McCarthy is a really interesting guy because he's not like Caleb Williams. Like, we know Caleb Williams going to Chicago. We have a pretty good sense that Jaden Daniels is going to be in Washington. And we don't know that, but we have a pretty good sense of it. J.J. McCarthy, Minnesota, Denver. I mean, it could be any of these teams that want to trade up for him. You brought this up in the first hour, and I think this is really important to understand. The reason that we're unsure about McCarthy is because we have not seen the body of work from McCarthy like we have with Williams, like we have from Daniels, like we have from May. But part of the reason we haven't is because Michigan was so good, McCarthy was rarely asked to do anything. I mean, what was the one game against Ohio State where they ran it like 40 times in a row? Like, he didn't have to do anything. He got benched in I don't know how many fourth quarters this year, so his stats were down. He's a tricky guy to try to figure out for dynasty purposes. Matt, what's going to happen to J.J. McCarthy once he gets to the NFL?
I firmly believe that McCarthy is a better pro prospect than he was a college prospect. I don't know if he's the number one quarterback in this draft, but he's got – I know we've heard that Joe Burrow comparison thrown out there, and people are like, yeah, okay, whatever. You watch some of those throws that he's dropping in there. I mean, there's not a whole lot to choose from. If you watch his body of work and take a close look at those throws, those are some pretty dang good throws that he's making. So we know he can make those throws. We've watched his pro days. We've watched the combine. We've seen all these things. You piece things together. I mean, there's a lot to like about McCarthy. Just because he hasn't had to do it doesn't mean that he can't do it.
Right.
He wasn't asked to do it. He didn't have to do it. It wasn't what Michigan's offense was. It wasn't Harbaugh's offense. I think he's a good pocket passer that can make all the throws that are needed with velocity. I mean, I think they track him as like the second hardest thrower at the combine. I think I can't remember what the number was in miles per hour, but he could pull it out of there pretty hard and let it rip.
Yeah.
So I got no problem with the throws that he can make and his ability. I think he's going to be a better pro. I think he's going to be a good pocket passer. I think it's important where he lands. But, I mean, I think there's a lot of potential for him. If he gets put in a good offense, like a Minnesota Vikings type offense, I think he could have a lot of success.
I think the other thing, too, to keep in mind with this is there are multiple teams that have been talking about multiple reports saying, oh, this Minnesota loves him or, Denver loves him or what have you. Like if all these NFL teams are on him to the point where they want to trade up to get him, I think we kind of know what the NFL thinks of JJ McCarthy, and we should start that. So what we think about or what we should be thinking about him in dynasty leagues. Last thing I want to get to this segment, year 2, speaking of young quarterbacks, it's year 2 of Bryce Young. The team is largely the same, I would say, as of right now, as far as the pass catchers go. Thielen's back, Miles Sanders, so on and so forth. But they did add Deontay Johnson here. Your thoughts on what's going to happen with Bryce Young this year in a year where his expectations are much lower than they were in year 1? It's going to be hard for him to disappoint us like he did in his rookie year, Matt.
I always joke that myself personally, I like to set the bar so low that every once in a while I trip over and people praise me. I mean, if you set that bar too high and you never achieve it, people are expecting you to reach that bar again with consistency. What's that get you? It gets you nothing. Mm-hmm. If you look like a failure, even though the bar is set this high and you've achieved it, you always look like a failure because you don't reach it again. If you set it too low and you trip over it, people give you all kinds of accolades. Look at Geno Smith. Look at Baker Mayfield. Then again, also look at the Dave Canales effect, which is what Bryce Young has going into year 2. He's going to break down his young quarterback, his footwork, and all this stuff, and he's going to resurrect him like Russell Wilson, Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield. Listen, I think Steve Smith had the best quote out there. A smart kid can look dumb if he's around a lot of dumb people. And that's what Carolina had last season. They did not support their rookie quarterback. They didn't give him anyone to be successful with. This season, Dave Canales comes in. You mentioned Deontay Johnson. But let's talk about the offensive line. Robert Hunt, Damian Lewis there. Both guys that come in there where they play the guard position. So he doesn't have to worry about that pressure coming right up the gun. Outside of a 33-year-old Adam Thielen there was no options in this Carolina Panthers passing game. Mingo didn't do nothing. Not one of these wide receivers could get open. Not one of these wide receivers could separate. What's the one thing that Deontay Johnson does exceptionally well throughout his career? That's create separation. Each of his last 4 years, Johnson's success rate versus man coverage and press coverage has been over 75%. His success rate versus zone coverage, even better, 82.8%. That's the worst that it's been over those 4 years. Last season, Johnson, he still managed to catch 51 passes out of the 87 thrown his way, 717 yards, a little bit of inconsistent quarterback play. I'm not going to fault him on that. Previous season saw Johnson targeted 144 times, 169 times, 147 times. You don't get targeted that often if you're not getting open. Yeah. Johnson's going to get open, and he's going to be a nice blanket for Bryce Young.
I have had a blast talking with Matt Donnelly here from the Dynasty Vipers Dynasty Vipers Network on YouTube. Check out his stuff at Fantasy Points and at Rotoballer. The conversation is not over. And here's what I want to do. I want to take a quick break. When we come back, let's talk about this Jalen McMillan tweet that you put out prior to the show that's garnered so many bookmarks and likes and retweets. I think it's important for you to kind of discuss what you meant by it. And I think that there's actionable advice here of what we should be doing with dynasty leagues regarding Jalen McMillan. We're also going to get into some Jalen Wright and some other rookies. We'll see how many we get to coming up. It's the final segment of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after this.
If you're not playing dynasty fantasy football right now, where we're still out there doing all sorts of trades and moves, everybody else that does like casual gamers that do redraft, they're done, and they're just kind of speculating or like talking about the draft. We're still playing. Like if you play dynasty, we play all year. I play over at FFPC. If you want to play there, use promo code COOP, C-O-O-P. We'll give you $25 when you deposit 35 or more at myffpc.com. And there's 2 ways to jump in over there. You can either do a startup, in which case you can get Dalton Kincaid way after guys like Sam Laporta and Trey McBride. Brock Bowers, I just saw that the rookie Brock Bowers, even before the draft, they're projecting him to go as like the tight end 2 in these startup drafts. Crazy, right? Like right after Laporta, which is nuts. Like you can get Kincaid, or if you don't want to do a startup, I think this is even more fun. You go out and take over an orphan team, right? So over at FFPC, they never close the leagues down. They just take the teams and, if somebody has to leave or whatever, then you can buy in and take that team. So you can go find a team that has Kincaid and a bunch of players you like, and you keep those players, and then you look at all the other players you don't like, and you have the golden opportunity to trade them away. Like, it's so much fun to take a team and be like, okay, you know what? Because if you do a startup, you love all the guys already. Like, those are your babies. If you do an orphan team, then you can trade away all the guys you don't like, and that's even more fun, honestly. You have the golden, the green light there. So go to myffpc.com. Use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more, and you'll give you a leg up versus starting your own league. Now you got to chase people down for dues. You got to pay your own money. So go get set up over there.
When you get the Fantasy Alarm All-Pro subscription now, you'll unlock all content for all sports, including all the annual draft guides, one-on-one expert access in the Discord, analyze matchups and trends in your league with the League Saint. The lineup generator is integrated with Fanjections as well. You're going to get daily rankings, weekly rankings, the value vaults there, position coaches, waiver wire ownership percentages, projection stats and tools, and much more. Build better lineups, guaranteed. You get access to everything Fantasy Alarm offers year-round. Right now, go to fantasyalarm.com/lock. Fantasyalarm.com/lock. Use promo code LOCK, LOCK. We are going to lock it up here in about 19 minutes. But before that, we are going to get to some rookie knowledge from the Dynasty Viper himself. You know him from the Dynasty Vipers Network. At Matt Donnelly, FF on the X, Fantasy Points, Rotoballer. Joining me tonight, talking a lot about rookie receivers, quarterbacks, tight ends, so on and so forth. Some running back discussion we get into. But we have to do this. We have to explain your X here. Now, this went out, Matt, 7 hours ago. A GIF of Jalen McMillan, the Washington receiver, and you posted, Jalen McMillan is this year's Puka Nacua. He's everything you want in Rome Odunze at half the price. Now, this could be true, but we have the opportunity of more than just a few characters. We can go deep in this. Why is Jalen McMillan, and in what sense is Jalen McMillan this year's Puka Nacua?
Listen, I mean, people take this how they want to take it, and that's fine. I mean, I've got, that explains everything. He has FF in his name. Yeah, we're talking fantasy football. Of course, That's where I'm going with this. Right. Listen, Washington, they had some stud wide receivers, Odunze, McMillan, Jalen Polk that no one's talking about right now. And somehow McMillan has been completely overshadowed because of what his teammates were able to accomplish. As for slot receivers, he's right up there. He's one of the smoothest operators out there. But people forget that before his injury last season, in those first 3 games, he was right up there with Odunze as far as yards and touchdowns were concerned in those first 3 games. The season prior, he had more receptions. As a sophomore, more yards and higher yards per route run. Praise Odunze all you want. Yeah, you should. He deserves the praise. But McMillan is going to be a great offer later on in these drafts. I'm getting those Puka Nacua type vibes out of him. And when I say Puka Nacua, he's going to be this year's Puka Nacua. It's not like he's going to go out there and put up 1,500 yards and be an all-pro. No, I'm talking about exactly what is going on here when the people are getting negative about this comment. You're already looking down on McMillan. And not one damn person out there, and I'll say this right now, no one had Puka Nacua as the wide receiver run in the rookie class last season. I guarantee you. Why do I guarantee you? Because I got him at 408 in a draft. That's where I'm going with this. Jalen McMillan is a guy that you're getting at the end of the 3rd round or in the 4th round of your rookie drafts that is going to give you production. He's going to be one of those wide receivers. You're like, oh, crap. All right, excellent. If you look at his college numbers, and I'm pretty sure I tweeted it somewhere in that whole breakout kind of thing there. I mean, yes, it's going to matter where he lands. There's several teams that definitely could use a slot wide receiver. The Jets have Xavier Gibson, the Ravens, Aguilar. The Bengals have Trent Irwin, the Steelers with Quez Watkins, the Chargers with Davis, Vikings with Sheffield, 49ers with Jennings. I mean, the Raiders have Trey Tucker. These are a few landing spots that make a lot of sense for teams that have a need for a slot wide receiver. But I can't remember where the tweet was as in response. But if you look at the numbers compared, I think you have to look at what he's done the last 2 seasons there. 2.3 yards per route run. His career average of 5.6 yards after the catch per reception, plus that 9.5 or 9.43 relative athletic score. That's hot. I like that. I dig that. He's not my typical kind of wide receiver that I fall in love with, but everything is there. He had production. People forget this. He had production in college. He actually 1 year had more yards and 1 year had more wide receptions than Odunze, who's being considered a top 6 rookie pick here in fantasy drafts, a top 10 draft pick, and yet we're talking about McMillan 3rd round, 4th round of the NFL draft, 3rd round, 4th round of your rookie drafts. This is what I'm trying to say. We are underrating what McMillan brings to the table, much like we did with Puka Nacua. We have to stop for a second and think, hey, why are some people in on this guy? It doesn't Odunze, he could be good. I'm not saying he's going to be better than Odunze. I'm saying he's going to put up similar type production, or there's potential for him to put up that production with half the cost invested into him. That's where I'm going with this.
And that makes perfect sense, right? I mean, we're all looking for the best way to utilize our draft capital, and utilizing draft capital on a guy like McMillan, if he does put up those type of numbers, he's going to pay off for you this year, much the way Puka Nacua paid off in spades last year. Xavier Worthy, let's talk about him. A guy who broke the combine record with a 4.21 40. He was clocked at just under 23 miles an hour with the ball in his hands in 2022, not this past year. He's probably now in the first round, the back end of the first round. However, and I will caution people against this, and Matt, I'll let you to weigh in. The guys who run these blistering 40s, if you look at like the top 10, it's not exactly like that translated into great fantasy football careers, right? So while it's fun to talk about with Worthy, we do have to kind of temper our expectations based on previous performances, don't we?
Yeah, I think when we look at offensive players to run the 40 with those blistering times, I think it's just Chris Johnson who's had production. I mean, the last wide receiver we've seen come close to those times, John Ross, Henry Ruggs. Where are they now? Well, I can tell you where Henry Ruggs is, and I don't want to go into that conversation either. Right. But you look at this other stuff. I mean, speed is great. The difference with Worthy is he can line up anywhere on the field. He is a smaller wide receiver, which we've seen have more success in today's game. But unfortunately, he's still a small wide receiver. And durability is going to be a concern no matter how you want to look at it. I look at him much like I look at Tank Dell. I think of a great guy who's going to give you some huge production when he's in your lineup, but he's going to carry that injury risk. He's going to get hurt at some point. You're not going to have him for a full season because he's going to be dealing with some nagging injuries or whatever it might be. Again, I am not doubting his ability here in any way, shape, or form, but sometimes your best ability is your availability, and I do worry about Worthy's availability moving forward for the whole grind of a 17-game schedule.
One of the players that I want to ask you about is Roman Wilson. Roman Wilson is a player that I've had a couple of high-stakes players tell me about, that they're watching out for him. They think that he is going to be sneaky good in the pros, and not a lot of people are talking about him because of guys like Brian Thomas and Odunze and Harrison and so on and so forth, and Neighbors, obviously. Right now, if I look at our never too early best ball ADP on my FFPC, you have Roman Wilson going as the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10th receiver off the board. Again, this is redraft, but I wanted to ask you about this in a dynasty sense. I have a sneaking suspicion you are higher on Roman Wilson than these drafters are. Why should they be higher on him?
Same reason why they should be on J.J. McCarthy. Roman Wilson wasn't asked to do much in that Michigan offense. We've seen all the traits. He's a guy who can produce at all three levels of the field, short, intermediate, deep. It doesn't matter. We've seen him take reverses. We've seen him make big plays over the middle. He's showing that willingness to go to places, make those catches that no one else is willing to do. That's going to make sure he finds success at the next level. I don't need to go back and watch a whole bunch of film if I can see a few of those type of plays there. I think he's one of those guys that also, he's going to do whatever you ask. He can line up anywhere on the field. He can attack any part of the field. I just don't think he's that alpha type wide receiver. I see him being a very good Robin to someone's Batman. When we talked about how a wide receiver 2 on a good team can still be a good wide receiver. And that's kind of where I see Roman Wilson. I see him kind of fit in that mold of a T. Higgins type guy or something like that who can give you some production a little bit later. Devontae Smith's another guy that comes to mind that you're like, okay, 1 week he's going to be on, 1 week he's going to be off. at the end of the day, he's going to still have a very good season, but it's going to be hard to predict where that fantasy value is going to come because he's not one of those top 4 guys that I got. He's not a Neighbors. He's not a Harrison. He's not that Odunze. He's not necessarily a Brian Thomas Jr., who I love. So, I mean, he's there. He's going to be good, but he's more of a second option as far as passing is concerned. Still good guy, going to win. Good flex option, possible wide receiver too, like a Devontae Smith, T. Higgins, as far as your fantasy lineups are concerned.
You mentioned that you love Brian Thomas Jr., but I think you said in the first hour there's some stuff that he needs to work on. What if you're drafting Brian Thomas, what do you want to see him polish up when he gets to the pros?
I just want to see him get some more reps in there. I mean, I want to see him be a little bit more fluid with his route tree and stuff like this. Like he was kind of a late bloomer as far as all that's kind of concerned there. But if you look at all the intangibles, the raw stuff, 6'3", 4.33, that's in the 96th percentile. Production's there, 1,100 yards, 17 touchdowns. Draft capital, he's going to go in the first round. Contested catch rate, I think it's like 53.8%. So he's got everything you want. He's a big man, and he can run. That's something that doesn't really happen as far as we see very often. You're either a big man who go out there and catch it, or you're a speedster out there. And kind of Thomas does both these things well. He's not as refined as a Harrison Jr. He's not as refined as a Neighbors. I think I can't remember if I see it in summer, but I think he was a little late to the wide receiver position, which is why we're probably seeing a little bit of that stunted right now. But it wouldn't surprise me if we're looking 4 or 5 years down the road, if Thomas is every bit as good, if not better than a Harrison, as an Odunze, as a Neighbors. I think there's a potential in his game where he could be that guy. He's got all the tools. He's got the size-speed combination. He could be that guy. It's just he needs a little bit more repetition in there as far as at the NFL game, those routes are concerned and stuff like that.
Might be a good guy to draft in your dynasty rookie draft and then let him marinate for a year and see what you have with him in 2025. He'll make some splash plays in 2024, but I think his sophomore year could be leaps and bounds better. I want to head back from the Bayou back up to Michigan, and let's talk about Blake Corum as we tackle some rookie running backs here. Corum, you mentioned, was a guy, unlike his college teammates, McCarthy and Wilson, he was asked to do a lot. He was asked to carry the load. He carried a ton of footballs. He had a ton of action, ton of touches over the course of his career, especially last year with Michigan as they won the national title. We cannot forget that. How much stock are you putting into him being only 5'7", 205 pounds, and ran a 4.53 40? He's a football player, Matt. Clearly, he can run the ball in the Big Ten. And at the highest level, he's a national champion. The metrics would say that maybe we shouldn't get too excited about this guy. And yet he could still be the number 1 running back drafted this year.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about this playoff run there. I mean, against Alabama, he averaged – this is a very good Alabama defense, by the way. 4.4 yards per carry against Alabama. Then against the Washington Huskies, which was another pretty good defense, 134 yards on 21 carries in that championship game. We talked about that load. 247 carries, 258 carries last couple seasons, 1,700 yards rushing, 35 touchdowns on the ground. He's averaging 5.5 yards per carry. That's production. At the end of the day, that's what I want for my running backs. He's got that nice compact frame, bounces off of defenders. He might not have that long speed, but he can accelerate in a hurry. He can get through holes, and he can pick up chunks in a hurry. He's not going to bust out an 80-yard run. More like it's probably not going to happen like some of these other wide running backs we talked about. Jalen Wright kind of comes to mind. But he's going to pick up some chunk plays. We know where he needs to kind of work on there is that it's like most running backs coming in. He's got to work on blitz picking up if you're going to have that. He's going to be a solid second running back. I don't know if he's going to be a starter unless he ends up with Dallas or something like that. Again, he ends up with Dallas. He's basically a slower version of Ezekiel Elliott, I guess. I don't know. I'm not going to compare him to Ezekiel Elliott, but he's going to do a lot of things that Elliott did later on in his career. Maybe not early on, Elliott, but he's going to be able to find that. And the only problem with him is, compared to some of these other backs, he doesn't offer much as far as the receiving game is concerned.
He is not an explosive player. We don't necessarily need our running backs to be explosive for them to be fantasy assets. However, it does help. A guy you just mentioned who's on the flip side of the explosive conversation is Jalen Wright from Tennessee. 5'10", 210. 11-foot, 2-inch broad jump, 4.38 40, RAS score 9.75. That athleticism score is 44th out of almost 1,800 running backs tested in the last almost 4 decades. His broad jump, second longest ever recorded. He does make the splash plays, right? This is what we want. You think about Devon Achane last year, a guy that, we knew he wasn't the biggest guy in the world, but in the right offense, he could be special. I remember Mike McDaniel's reaction on draft night when they drafted Devon Achane. He did the fist bump. He was excited. And then we were excited when we drafted him. Jalen Wright, are you going to be excited if you draft this player this year? What's his future in the NFL look like?
I love Jalen Wright. I think he offers you everything. 1,100 yards from scrimmage last season, splitting time in that Tennessee backfield. Listen, he's going to be a committee kind of guy. I think he's going to be a guy like a Tony Pollard type situation there where he's going to have more success with fewer touches. He's going to be able to make bigger plays. I think that's he's going to be an efficient guy. He gives me kind of like Ty Chandler type vibes. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. And he's going to be one of those guys that as the year goes on, he's going to get more and more opportunities, which means maybe the first 5-6 weeks, if you draft him, he might not be producing a whole heck of a lot, but as the year goes on, he's going to have more and more value. He's possibly going to take reps away from whoever that starter happens to be. Say he ends up in Los Angeles with a Gus Edwards. I mean, I could see him overtaking Gus Edwards as the season goes on, even in a Harbaugh-type offense there. So he's very dependent on where he lands, but he does offer you, like you said, Devon Achane, some of those plays that he can make. I could see him making very similar type production.
The last running back I want to talk about tonight is a guy that I think is picking up steam, Matt, in a lot of pundits out there talking about him. I know a lot of fantasy players are excited about Marshawn Lloyd as well, a player that I have heard some people say is their number one running back this year. I think we're kind of picking at nits because I know you love Braylon Allen as your number one, and I'm repping my Badgers tonight. I got my UW Badgers sweatshirt on. I love watching Braylon Allen throughout his college career, but there's a lot of running backs that I think I can't really poke holes in if you're going to say he's your number one running back. Where is Marshawn Lloyd ranked for you for running backs right now?
I like that you mentioned poking holes because I could poke holes in every one of these running backs, right? I mean, there's not one of those guys that you're like, yeah, that's the guy. That's my Ezekiel Elliott. That's my Bijan Robinson. No, there's none of these guys fill that role. I got Lloyd as my RB2. So I'm one of those guys that's a little bit higher on him there. He's coming off a career high, 116 carries, 820 yards, average 7.1 yards per carry. Now, it is worth mentioning that maybe one of the reasons we're not hearing his name is that ACL injury that he had back in 2020, because as soon as a guy has an ACL injury, we want to devalue them as far as fantasy is concerned. ACL injuries aren't like they used to be. I mean, I don't know what an ACL injury that's really ruined a player's career in the last few seasons. It seems to be one of those injuries that guys can now come back from, which used to be a death sentence for running backs 15 years ago. That's no longer the case. We watched him carry the load. We can be part of the committee. The one thing that I like about him, though, when you compare him to the rest of this draft class of the running back position, he ranks first or second when it comes to the breakaway rate, the PFS elusive rush rating there, rushing missed tackles forced, and total missed tackles forced per attempt. Those are all things I really look at when I'm looking for a running back, especially a guy that I'm going to draft high as far as fantasy is concerned. Can he make something out of nothing? Can he break away from a pack? Can he break a tackle? These are all things that Lloyd does. He's probably the best in the class when it comes to this. So he could be a very good flex option. But again, like all the other running backs, very landing spot dependent.
Yeah, totally. And I think he could, like, you mentioned Los Angeles. Los Angeles, yeah, we're really going to love him. Dallas, yeah, we're really going to love him. He lands somewhere else where he's like, like Las Vegas or the Packers or something like that. Yeah, then maybe we're not loving him as much. But we will see. We're less than a month away from the draft. Matt Donnelly joining me tonight. Matt, we continue to follow you on the X at Matt Donnelly FF. YouTube.com/Vipers Network is where we can watch the Dynasty Vipers content there. Fantasy Points, Rotoballer. Is there anything else I should mention for anybody who is craving more Matt Donnelly content in their life?
No, I mean, a lot of these things that we talk about today, you can catch right on that Vipers Network YouTube channel. We talk a lot about, I break down a lot of the free agent stuff there, talk about my top wide receivers, running backs, and how that all breaks down. So you can check that all out there. I think you summed it up pretty good.
Let's do one quick question from Don Gazzetti right now. He wants to know how you got started in the industry.
Well, if anyone knows who I am, you'll understand that I'm a very petty individual. And I make no qualms about it. So it really all got started with the Scott Fishbowl. And anyone who knows fantasy knows about the Scott Fishbowl. And my first year going in there, I went in as Matt Donnelly fan. That's kind of how it went. And I got in there, and probably a lot of people look at me the same way. And they're like, well, if this guy could be an analyst, I could definitely be an analyst. But I got into a league, and I'm looking at some of these people. I'm reading some of their work. And I'm like, how am I the fan here? So I literally started a website and then called Scott Fish up. I'm like, hey, Scott, I'm not a fan anymore. I'm an analyst. Can I change that? He goes, absolutely. So that's kind of the short version of it, because that's just who I am. Sorry.
That's fantastic. Never heard that story before, but I'm glad I did. And more people should be doing that. So that's awesome. We will continue to consume all that content you're creating. Matt, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Don't forget, for everybody watching, to hit that QR code to join FFPC Empire Leagues. We got startups going on there at the $100 level. MyFFPC.com is where to go for that, as well as Dynasty Orphans, the Never Too Early Best Ball tournaments, both the Superflex and the non-Superflex, and of course the Fantasy Pros Championship, which is live right now. $1 million grand prize, $6 million prize pool there. That's all at myffpc.com, myffpc.com. Want to thank Matt Donnelly. I want to thank our producer, Matt Deutsch, hanging out tonight. We are back 7 o'clock next Thursday with Dynasty Nerds Garrett Price. He will be my co-host for the entire show. We'll get into a lot of rookie stuff with him. It's almost time, people. We are almost to the NFL draft. I can't wait for it. For Matt Donnelly, I'm Eric Balkman. Thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you again next week.